Passage of Shadows, the Victorian Gothic Collection, Book 3. Written by Chastity Bolin. Narrated by Lillian Eves and Vincent Lee Grayson. Prologue. Diamonds sparkled beneath the brilliantly glittering chandeliers. The elegant figures of some of the most admired and envied women in the world were draped in gowns of the finest silk and the most luxurious velvets. Music swelled from the finely tuned instruments of the orchestra, and champagne flowed freely. It was a party like so many parties amongst the creme de la creme of New York society. She could hear her mother's voice, but it was as if from a great distance. Adelaide whirled, looking about the room for familiar faces, but found none. Everyone appeared off somehow. They looked similar to people she had known in her life, but not quite right. The faces were indistinct, shifting, ever-changing. The laughter and music grew louder and louder, the sound soaring to the point of being deafening. In the middle of that crowded ballroom, Adelaide clapped her hands over her ears and tried to drown out the noise. Many pointed and laughed even louder. Others still whispered behind their gloved hands as they pointed with their bejeweled fans. All of them scoffed and taunted, however. "She's not like us, you know."
"She's like her mother."
"They warned him not to marry her."
"I heard her family practiced the old ways." "They're both odd. So very, very
She'll
odd."
never make a match, not with that figure and her mother's oddness about
They
her.
never should have encouraged her to be a reformer. Look how dark her hair and eyes are.
Do you suppose she's a gypsy, as they say?
He'll have to buy her a husband in Europe.
No one in New York will have her.
Maybe he can get her a title to make up for all of her strangeness.
Just another dollar princess to be shipped off. The whispers came one right after another. While the shifting faces were unrecognizable to her, the words were those she had heard again and again during her time as an outcast on the periphery of the Knickerbocker set. Adelaide had heard them in one variation or another from her childhood. Never pretty enough, never witty or charming enough, too plump for some, too short for others, too dark for many of them, with her dark hair and dark eyes. Ethnic, one woman had whispered. Gypsy, others had whispered still, as if it were the dirtiest of words that could ever be said of a woman. In that horrible moment, totally alone amongst the elite who detested her, Adelaide wanted to shout, but she could only kneel on the floor and hold her hands over her ears to block out the sounds. But then she saw her mother, distant, floating about the edge of the room, weaving between the other guests. It was almost as if she wanted to be seen, but not necessarily noticed. There was something very furtive and surreptitious about her movements. Struggling to her feet, Adelaide fled. Following the example of her mother, she did so without any real direction. Up the stairs she climbed, down one twisted hall after another. It seemed almost as if the rabbit warren of Cuscot Liss were imposing itself over the memory of her childhood home. But at last, she found herself outside her mother's chamber. Throwing the door open, she rushed inside. Seated at her dressing table, wearing a gown of sea-foam silk and ecru lace, her mother looked exactly as she had the last time Adelaide had been permitted to see her, before her illness had become such that her father refused to let her near her mother. It had ravaged her body, robbing her of the beauty that had been such a point of pride. As always, the suspicion reared its ugly head that perhaps Muriel had somehow had a hand in hastening her mother's death. But it wasn't time to think of Muriel and her wickedness. There was something about that moment, an overwhelming sense of just how fleeting it was. It was an opportunity that she could not and would not squander. "Mother," Adelaide cried out, "I've missed you so." "Be quiet, child," her mother said softly, and before Adelaide could question what she was doing, her mother rose and grasped her hands, tugging her toward the small sitting room just off her bedchamber. It had always been off limits to her, forbidden, a magical, mystical retreat, a place where her mother had spent so much time sequestered that Adelaide had resented that space as a child. "I can't go in there. It isn't allowed," Adelaide said. "It wasn't allowed. But you are not a child now, and you must," her mother insisted. "It's the only way. You must know the truth that I hid from you for so very long." Adelaide opened her mouth, but her mother shushed her. The sound so like what she'd heard as a girl that she could only obey it. The sitting room door opened, and she was pulled inside. There were no chairs, only brightly colored cushions littering the intricately woven carpet. It was all vivid hues and lush fabrics. There was something feminine and exotic about the space, with its low tables and carved trunks with brass hardware that surrounded the room. "What is all of this?" Adelaide asked, glancing around at items that she couldn't name, but that were decidedly mystical in nature. She could feel the power of them, she thought. "Things from my travels when I was a girl," her mother said. "I spent a great deal of time in India with my father." "But these things do not look Indian," Adelaide said. "They are not. Not all of them. Some of them are from my mother's people. She was Romani. Some would say she was more than Romani. Some would call her a witch." It was a rumor that had dogged them all of their lives, and one that had always been staunchly denied. "We have Romani blood?" "We do, or at least you and I do. It's that very blood which led you back to the land from whence we first came, to the very place where our blood was first cursed," her mother said ominously. "Akrita." The word escaped her lips in a whisper of dread. Her mother's eyes widened with terror. "Shh. You mustn't speak her name here, in this place, even in your dreams. You are protected here, but she is very powerful. Remember that, Adelaide. If you ever need this place, if you ever need to know you are safe, you have only to think of this place, and your heart will lead you here." Adelaide's heart was pounding. She could feel sweat beading on her skin. It was as if she was being pulled from her dream, pulled from the safety of that chamber. "Yes, Mother. Can you tell me how to defeat her?" "You know how, my darling. You've already puzzled that out yourself, clever as you are. Do not speak of it here, just in case, but see your plan through, and free yourself and your husband from her hold." Adelaide glanced up then. "You know him? You know Eldrin?" "My dear, I will always be near you. I will always watch over you as best I can. But my power within her sphere is limited. If you seek me, do so at the ocean, where it is safe from her." She grows impatient, Adelaide. You must wake and face her. Abruptly, Adelaide's eyes opened. She was no longer in the home of her childhood, no longer in the safe cocoon of her mother's secret room. She was in her own bed, her husband sleeping beside her, and above her loomed a dark and ominous shadow. Even as the scream threatened, burgeoning in her throat, The dark figure raised long and bony hands, blackness dripping from those elongated fingertips, thick and dark as pitch. It splashed upon Adelaide's forehead, and the scream broke free. The sound of it split the darkness and echoed off the stone walls of Cuscadlis. She'd woken from a dream to a living nightmare.
Chapter 1. For most men, it was not a daily occurrence to be awakened by his wife, screaming like a banshee in the night. But most men did not live at Cuscadlis, and were not faced with the kinds of otherworldly horrors they dealt with on a daily basis. Eldrin sighed. Had it really been only 2 short months since he'd convinced himself he could ignore the oddities of his ancestral home?
Are you certain it wasn't simply a dream, a vision that spilled over from your sleep?
Madame Leola asked with concern. It was clear she was worried for Adelaide, and for the toll this most recent attack had taken on her. "I saw it, Madame Leola," Eldrin said, "and I do not possess any of your unusual abilities to peer into another's dreams or commune with the spirit world."
Her.
Adelaide corrected him.
You saw her standing over me.
I cannot attest to the sex of the entity, only that I have never seen anything so wretchedly foul in my life, Eldrin admitted. Thin, with unnaturally elongated limbs, and all of it coated in a black, oozing muck that had reeked to the heavens. He'd been horrified by it. Can you explain to me how she has advanced from being a mere shadow to being this, Madame Leola? It was as if she was no longer simply manipulating the physical world, but was now a part of it.
It is only a theory,
the mystic said.
But I believe that every death that has occurred within these walls, and whatever rituals that have been undertaken with Mrs. Llewellyn to bring her fully back into the realm of the flesh, have initiated a metamorphosis, as it were, albeit a very unpleasant one.
Heaven forbid she manages to slay another person or have some fool do her bidding, Lord Mortimer interjected. I can't help but think this will only make her more dangerous.
She is trapped somewhere between the world of the living and the dead now,
Madame Leola postulated.
In a kind of limbo that does indeed make her very dangerous, but also vulnerable, I think. If we could uncover a method to...
The statement went unfinished as the wind picked up outside, howling to the point that the doors of the morning room were forced open. Of course, Eldrin knew that the mystic's reticence was an act. Madame Leola was aware of the plan, and she knew it only because of her psychic connection to Adelaide. The two of them shared thoughts in ways he could not comprehend. Only poor Lord Mortimer remained in the dark about their great scheme to hide enough explosives in the house to level it to naught but ash and rubble. Whether it would meet with any success, or would simply be a grand and destructive gesture of rebellion, remained to be seen. It was a radical scheme, with only Adelaide's newly discovered skills and instincts to guide them. It was a difficult thing to trust, and yet she had been correct about so many things. Her sense of knowing, of intuiting what was happening in the house and the nature of the evil they were dealing with, had only grown sharper and more acute with every passing day. The only feasible explanation was that something about Cuscadlis had unlocked her capabilities. The presence of Madame Leola had somehow honed them to a precision which left him staggered. It was not without cost to her, though. He'd seen how it tormented her. Waking up to the terrible sight of that dark, shadowy thing standing above her had left him, possibly, more shaken than even she was. He was a man, after all, It was his duty to protect his wife against anyone or anything that would harm her, and yet he was incapable. It was beyond his ability to do so, and yet, as terrifying as it was, he found himself more entranced by her daily. Whatever gifts or curses she possessed, he wanted to share them with her, to help her bear up under the weight of such an awesome burden. As if she'd somehow ciphered the nature of his thoughts, of his terrible doubts, Adelaide reached out her hand toward him. Unable to resist any opportunity to touch her, he accepted it gratefully. Even that innocent touch stirred him. His need for her was something he had never experienced in his life, something he'd never anticipated. And yet he could not imagine his life without her now. "Is that why she is emboldened now?" Eldrin asked. "Because she now has one foot in the world of both the living and the dead? But if, as you say, it also renders her vulnerable, it seems that would encourage her to be a bit more circumspect."
"Perhaps,"
Madame Leola replied.
"Perhaps she is emboldened by her nearness to her goal. Or perhaps she isn't emboldened at all. Perhaps she is lashing out from fear. Regardless, if becoming flesh again is her goal, as we suspect, then having come so close might well spur her to greater and more terrible action. What were you dreaming before this, Lady Montkeith? Perhaps she wished to interrupt one of your visions, for lack of a better word. All she interrupted was a deep, satisfying, and far too short-lived dream. I've no wish to talk about this anymore,"
Adelaide said, but a look passed between her and the mystic, a look that indicated there was much left unsaid.
I awoke. She was standing there, her form clearly different than any previous incarnation we have seen of her, but that means nothing. She has the ability to manipulate the physical world, to manipulate our senses. Nothing she shows us can be trusted.
"Then what can we trust if not our own senses?" Lord Mortimer demanded.
"We must have faith, Lord Mortimer,"
Adelaide continued.
"We must trust that some divine presence is guiding us, and that we have the wisdom to ascertain which is which."
The elder nobleman threw his hands up in the air as he paced. "I have little enough of such a refined feeling, Lady Montkeith. Under the circumstances, singled out as surely you have been by this fiendish entity, I cannot understand your calm demeanor."
"Because she wants me to fear her. She wants to see me terrified and cowed. And while I may have been startled by tonight's events, I refuse to be broken by them,"
Adelaide replied firmly.
"But I am very tired. I think, for the moment, the best option is for all of us to seek our beds. And Leola, we will take our scheduled constitutional in the morning. I find that a good long walk in the brisk air does more to soothe my jangled nerves than anything else." "Indeed, my dearest friend. With the coming wedding, we have many details to discuss,"
the psychic agreed. When the couple had gone and they were alone once more, Eldrin spared a more knowing glance at his wife. "You are not so unmoved by tonight's experiences as you would have them believe."
"I would not mar their newfound happiness with it, unless it is of absolute necessity. Besides, there is little they can do to provide protection against such evil, and even less they can do to soothe my well-founded fear of it,"
Adelaide answered.
"Just as there is little you can do on either front."
"I wish I had never brought you here," Eldrin said gruffly, rising from his seat next to her to pace the width of the room.
"You surely do not mean that."
It was the wounded note in her voice that reached through his anger and doubt. Scrubbing a hand over his face, he admitted, "I do." Not because I do not adore you, or because my life would not be desolate without you in it, but if it meant living a life of loneliness, to spare you what you have suffered here, I would do that, Adelaide.
And what of the life of loneliness I would have led?
She asked.
Yes, there are fearsome things that happen within these walls, but wondrous things as well. I cannot imagine what my life would be without you in it. Probably locked in an asylum by now at the behest of Muriel. No doubt she would have convinced all of New York society that my father's tragic death was the final straw that drove me entirely mad. Perhaps we are not out of danger yet, Eldrin. But do not think for one moment that you have not already saved me. You saved me from something far worse than what might happen here. Here, at least, I know what my purpose in life truly is.
And what is that? To be haunted and tormented by this curse that has tormented my family for centuries? He asked bitterly.
To be your wife, to love you, and to be loved by you. There is nothing I would change if it meant I would wind up anywhere but here. Heaven help me, not even the death of my father.
She admitted. Adelaide, he began, his spiraling emotions calmed by her gentle words.
No, don't say it. I know it makes me sound like a terrible and ungrateful child, but if he had lived, you would not have felt compelled to make the offer you did. And long before he died, he was lost to me anyway, taken by Muriel's lies and schemes. Fate brought me to you, with all the seemingly capricious twists and turns along the way. Each one of them was a key point in my journey here. I can see that now, even when I could not before.
The longing slammed into him fiercely, the need for her, to hold her and touch the silken flesh of her body, to hear her cries of pleasure in the darkness. It consumed him. Come to bed with me, he whispered hotly. There is one way I know to purge the ugliness of this night from both our minds. She rose and held her hand out to him once more.
Not in our bed. Not in a room where she has invaded our peace. Take me here, Eldrin.
It was not a request she'd need to make twice. Pulling her close to him, he slid his hands beneath the velvet of her dressing gown, touching the fine lawn of her night rail beneath it. The firm and supple resilience of her flesh beneath was a balm to him. Digging the tips of his fingers in just above the curve of her hips, he pressed the hardness of his body against her, letting her feel what it was that she did to him. You drive me wild, he murmured against her ear before kissing the spot just below it, where her neck and shoulder met, that made her moan with need. Every touch was incendiary. When she bit the lobe of his ear, when her nails raked along his back, and when she leaned against him, her breasts crushed against his chest, he ached for her. It was not the tender loving that he so often showed her, nor was it the slow rise of passion, the teasing and taunting, until she begged him to grant her release. That moment, it was heated and fierce. He lifted the hem of her night rail, pressed her back onto the settee that had likely never seen such undignified activity, and he pushed himself eagerly into the welcoming heat of her. She cried out, his name passing her parted lips on that sweet sound. Swift, fierce, full of fire and fueled by the fear he'd felt for her, and if he were honest with himself, the fear he sometimes felt of her. It was a wild rush to completion for them both. Somehow, At the last moment, he managed to pull back, to withdraw and spill himself across the silken flesh of her thigh. It was a near thing, a risk he should have known better than to take, but he couldn't bring himself to regret it. In the end, they were left panting, clinging to one another as sweat cooled on their skin, and only the sound of their ragged breathing filled the room. In the end, they were left panting, clinging to one another as sweat cooled on their skin, and only the sound of their ragged breathing filled the room.
Chapter 2. It had been a long night for Adelaide, one beset by sleeplessness. Even after the passionate encounter she'd shared with her husband in the morning room, she'd been unable to put the terrifying vision of Agrita from her mind. There was little doubt for her that the dark, dripping figure who had loomed over her had been the ancient witch, hovering on the cusp of attaining a fleshly form once more. The truth was that Adelaide struggled with understanding the motives of the creature. Her power was so great, and while such a power was not something she herself would ever aspire to, it seemed to her an odd thing that once attained, it would be willingly sacrificed. There must be some way that Agrita believed she could have both, Adelaide thought. Otherwise, she would never do so. As she strolled down the path toward the beach, Madame Leola walking quietly beside her, she continued to puzzle on that. "You're thinking so loudly. Even those in the village can hear you," Madame Leola jested drolly. Adelaide laughed softly. I can't help it. I'm afraid. Does it not leave you with questions, Leola? Why? What does she hope to gain from this? Leola shrugged. If we knew that, we could likely have stopped this long before now. I had no inkling last night that she was roaming the house, playing her nasty tricks. It's been some time since any spirit, or whatever it is that she may be, has been able to hide from me. But if she's concealing herself from us, even at times, it means she fears us. It was time for Adelaide to confess the truth of her dream. They had reached the beach, and the same salt that they had sprinkled in circles to protect them within the house surrounded them, filling even the air itself around them. How strange that the water she had feared was the very thing that provided them such protection now. I think she did, indeed, do so out of fear. I also think, perhaps, that I know why. The mystic looked at her expectantly. "Do not keep me in suspense, my dear." Adelaide blurted it out quickly. "My mother came to me last night, Leola, in a dream. She told me how I was connected to this place and how I am connected to Agrita. I know some will say it was only my own current situation that prompted dreams of my mother, that my mind was simply trying to provide comfort to me in such a troubled time. But it was more than that. So much more." The other woman stopped, her steps faltering. After a moment of blinking owlishly at her, Leola moved toward a large rock and placed her shawl over it before sitting down. "Tell me everything. You mustn't leave out a single detail." Adelaide moved toward that rock and sat down next to her friend. There were rumors in New York, far more viciously whispered while my mother lived, about where we had come from. My grandmother was rumored to have been Romani, and if this dream was accurate, that is the truth. And the Rom tribe she was descended from originated from right here, a survivor of the massacre that Agrita instigated by Alwyn's hand. "She told you all of that?" Adelaide sighed. "She told me about the Rom, and that Romani blood connected me to this land. The rest is supposition on my part, and she told me of a place that I could find in my dreams, a room that had been hers in our house in New York, where Agrita cannot reach me. She said it was my safe place, my haven, and that I should seek it here when I needed to feel safe from Agrita's attack. A protected astral refuge. How utterly amazing, Madame Leola gushed. You see, my own abilities have been passed down to me by my own Romani ancestors, and when I was a small girl, before I had learned to control my extra senses, I was taught of just such a thing myself. I haven't attempted to reach that plane in years, because I haven't needed to. Why on earth did your mother come to you with this now? I believe that she has tried to reach me before, but my own abilities were too limited by my ignorance. My mother hid any gifts she might have, from me and likely from my father as well. I think anything that he saw in her that could not be easily explained away was simply labeled an eccentricity. I know that he was infatuated with my mother, but I do not think he truly loved her, and I think she wanted his love desperately. She tried to make herself, and by extension me, into perfect examples of society ladies. We both failed miserably, Adelaide confessed. It is never a failure to be who you truly are. It is only a failure if you lose sight of that. Do you think that your mother repressed her abilities and yours to the point that it has taken her this long to be able to reach you? Leola queried gently. I think it is as likely an explanation as any. And I think, also, that she fears Agrita. She cannot protect me from her there, in that house. My mother may not have died at Cuscatlis, but if Agrita could hold her there, I hesitate to think what might occur. But she did confirm that our suspicion of how to destroy her is the only way. Leola nodded. And what are the arrangements there? Adelaide answered carefully, pitching her voice so that it was nothing more than a whisper. Agrita might not be able to follow them to the beach, but that didn't mean Frances was her only living servant. The wives of the miners are making wreaths, garlands, and other greenery for the house. Prior to bringing them home, Eldrin will hide the charges in them. Leola, there is something else, Adelaide said. What is it, my dear? Adelaide thought of the passage she'd read in the book Eldrin had given her when she first arrived that detailed the family history of the Llewellyns. Eldrin once told me that this evil that plagued his family tormented the eldest son, always the heir to the title of Count of Montkeith, and it tormented his brother, Alden, until he became a cruel man, half mad with it. He committed suicide on the moor. And he is trapped there. Adelaide hadn't even considered that. She'd been more consumed with what she'd discovered and hadn't spared a thought for Eldrin's brother. He must be. But in this book, I found something else, Leola. I hadn't shared this with anyone yet, not even Eldrin. In truth, I'm not even sure where to begin. Tell me, my friend, Leola urged. Tell me, and we will discover the way together. It was a letter to Eldrin's father from a servant girl here at the estate. She spoke of the son she bore him, but based on the date of that letter, that son would be the eldest by a matter of days, unless, perhaps, there was some other trickery afoot. Leola leaned forward and removed her half-boots and stockings before she began the arduous process of tucking her heavy skirts up to allow her to walk barefoot on the sand. Walk with me, the mystic urged. We both think better when we are on our feet, and there is less risk of us being overheard if we are closer to the water. Adelaide removed her own shoes. She didn't have the fuss of her own skirts, since she'd worn the bicycling costume she'd purchased in Paris. Poor Tromley had looked to be on the verge of apoplexy when he saw her ankles. You were unaware because of all the events that transpired before you came. But Eldrin's mother, Sylvia, had denied him repeatedly. She would not acknowledge him as her son. And now this letter. I wonder, perhaps, if he was not her son at all. And I don't know whether or not I should tell him. He's had so much pain already. Leola linked her arm through Adelaide's. We've discussed the danger of taking any items from the house when we do what it is that we must do. She has invaded every nook and cranny, every stone, every crevice, and every slip of paper that exists within. If she has even a hint that her link to this mortal world is about to be destroyed, that attachment she has, that bond to those things, could well destroy our efforts. I think you must tell him, Adelaide, and you must let him decide what he wishes to do with that information. But you cannot take that letter with you, and we are running out of time for you to share such things with him. Adelaide considered that all very carefully. I don't want to hurt him more, but if he should ever discover that I concealed this from him, he is so very stoic in the face of such things, and yet I know that every time she denied him, it cut him so deeply. He loved her, even if she failed him abominably. Not everyone has your strength, my dear. She endured greatly in this house, and her mind, at the end, was not her own. Leola paused. And there is another possibility. What if the woman who gave birth to him is still alive, still wishing for her lost son? If she was but a housemaid, she would have had to simply go along with whatever his father suggested. Perhaps it was not her wish to give him up at all. You're right, of course. I know that. And he does as well. Perhaps that news will actually give him comfort. There might be a way to find her, if she still lives. He could have some semblance of a family again, perhaps, Adelaide mused, touched by Leola's sympathy for Sylvia. But then, perhaps she does not wish to be found. I do not know the circumstances of her relationship with his father, and the letter that had been written between them was perfunctory at best. Had there been any tenderness between them, it was long gone before that letter was ever written. You must tell him, and let him decide. And you must tell me where you got this delightful costume. I have not seen one that is its equal. The last was added in a louder tone, one intended to carry. It was a diversion, and one that Adelaide recognized easily enough. Glancing up, she saw Eldrin walking down the beach toward her. His expression was grim. "What's happened?" she called out.
Warren has been summoned to the asylum in Chester to deal with Frances,
Eldrin said.
She's claiming all manner of wicked things about the family and about the house.
To what end? Eldrin offered a simple shrug that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the snug fit of his coat.
Who can say why Frances does anything? I'm sure she imagines some gain in it for herself. Or perhaps it was simply a ploy to bring Warren running to her aid so that she can attempt once more to seduce him to her side and make him utterly miserable.
Leola nodded. I'm going back to the house to check on John. It was a very late night for him. You should enjoy a walk together while the weather is fine. And Lord Montkeith, in light of all that has occurred, we've decided that the wedding should be postponed until we return to London. It makes more sense, and will seem less suspicious that way. Rather than having all of your servants attend our wedding, they will attend a church service in the village and partake of the food that would have been our wedding feast. Adelaide was stunned. Are you certain? I thought you wanted to be wed as soon as possible. Madame Leola smiled. Quite certain. I advise you to trust your instincts, my friend, and I must heed my own advice and trust my own.
Eldrin watched the psychic beat a hasty retreat toward the house and spared a glance at his wife. Do you want to explain what that is all about?
What?
Her sudden decision to cancel the wedding that had been the linchpin of our plan, the very distraction we had created in order to carry out this scheme.
We must trust her judgment, Eldrin. I am disappointed for them, though. They were so eager and have waited for so very long.
He shook his head. Trust her judgment, instincts, feelings, prophetic dreams. Adelaide, I will not pretend to know what the two of you do here, or how it pertains to all of the inexplicable things that occur within the walls of Cuscod Liss. But I do know that this is the one place where the two of you feel safe to discuss your abilities, what you can and cannot do, and what Madame Leola can and cannot teach you. If she ended this morning's sojourn prematurely, there must have been a reason for it. She looked away, her gaze settling over the crashing surf and beyond to the horizon where blue sky and blue water converged.
I'm uncertain of how to even begin.
Eldrin held out his hand to her. Walk with me, and begin at the beginning. With her hand in his, they set off down the beach, moving further from the house.
I think when your mother denied you, Eldrin, that it was not simply the ravings of a madwoman. I think that while you are your father's son, you were never hers.
Adelaide, Alden and I were twins. You are mistaken, Eldrin said with a frown.
You had a brother, Eldrin. But what if bringing you here, forcing Sylvia to raise you as her own? What if that was your father's attempt to circumvent the grip that Agrita has on your family? I found a letter, Eldrin, where a servant girl who had worked here and had a relationship with your father wrote to him about taking her child and raising that child as a legitimate son. Given the date of that letter, she could only have meant you or your brother.
His blood was rushing in his ears, his heart pounding. It would explain so much. It was both unbearably painful and the most exquisite sense of relief. Where is this letter now?
It's in the book you gave me on the Llewellyn family history. It was tucked behind the end papers. Whoever put it there was not trying to hide it forever, I think.
Adelaide said softly.
But neither did they mean for it to be readily available to anyone who might peruse that volume. Will you try to contact her?
I will speak with Tromley. He's been here since before I was born, after all. I'm certain he could tell me more about her before we make any decisions. I've no wish to invite more problems into our life right now. Eldrin replied honestly. He couldn't think, couldn't fathom what to do. What were you and Madame Leola so intently discussing this morning?
Just that we're on the right path. Our plan to destroy this house, and hopefully to destroy Agrita along with it, must continue. It's the only way.
Adelaide said. Her hand moved from his arm, sliding down until their fingers intertwined. They walked peacefully along the beach for some time, enjoying the unseasonably mild temperature and the sunshine. More than anything else, he simply enjoyed being in her presence, feeling her body pressed against his side, her small hand in his. It was a moment that allowed him to forget all the strange and otherworldly things that plagued them. It was a moment where he was simply a man enjoying a stroll with his wife. But it was a moment that could not last because they had plans to make and schemes to hatch. Christmas Eve is 2 days hence, he reminded her. The garland will be brought to the mine office tomorrow. We will meet here, and the charges will be wired into each one of them before we bring them to the house tomorrow evening. From that point, Adelaide, the danger really begins. It isn't simply that we'll be sleeping in a house filled with explosives. If this creature has even the slightest suspicion of what we're about to do...
She will not. The servants do not know, and they will not. And there is nothing at all suspicious about allowing them to attend Mass on Christmas Eve. Agrita will not find it odd that they are leaving the house on such a day. Eldrin, it is our only chance, and we will take it. We must.
He no longer had any qualms about destroying Cuscod Liss. It might have been his family seat, but the more he'd thought of it, the more willing he'd been to see the place reduced to rubble. Nothing good came from it. It brought only misery and ruin to everyone.
Chapter 3. Frances paced her cell. They could call it an asylum or a sanitarium, but she'd never stayed in such a horrible place in her life. The jail would likely be better. The room was dank and dirty. The only window a mere slit in the brick wall, too high to admit any light or air. It offered her a sliver of sky, just enough to highlight her misery. But that wasn't the true source of her discomfort. Agrita. Frances had tried to flirt with one of the guards, or as they styled themselves, attendants. If the door was locked with her on one side and the key on the other, that made them guards, whatever they might choose to call themselves. The man had been completely disinterested in her. It was as if her beauty had not fazed him at all. It was a situation she had never encountered in her life. Frances was used to men gushing about her charms, flattering her and vying for her attention. For him to simply look right through her, as if she didn't even exist, was panic-inducing. Her stockinged feet made no sound as she paced. They'd taken her shoes from her for reasons she could not begin to comprehend. Her gown, a hideous black thing she'd filched from Adelaide, had been taken as well. In its place, they'd given her a simple shift that was barely better than rags. She had no comb for her hair, no pins. In very short order they'd managed to make her look as if she belonged there. If there was one thing Frances understood, it was the importance of appearances. It would have to be rectified, or any hope of being able to have some semblance of sway or control in that place would fade into nothingness. No sooner had that dismal thought crossed her mind than she heard the key in the lock. Making a concerted effort to smooth her hair and look somewhat presentable, Frances waited. Warren would fix everything. He might despise her, but he was weak and manageable, at least. The door opened, and the attendant stepped inside, Warren right behind him.
"Leave us,"
Warren said. He looked pale, and there was still a nasty bruise upon his forehead. That he'd come at all, given his own state of health, gave Frances some hope that he'd do what he could to improve her situation.
"I don't know if that's wise, sir. She is a murderer, after all,"
the attendant said.
"She's done worse,"
Warren replied, and held up a shiny coin between his thumb and forefinger.
"And I'll call out if I need assistance." "Aye, sir,"
the attendant said, suddenly quite cooperative. He took the coin and fled the tiny brick room without a backward glance, the door closing and locking behind him. Warren turned to her then, his gaze cold and his jaw surprisingly firm.
"What is it you would have of me, Frances?"
There was no need in deviating from what typically worked, Frances decided. Throwing herself to her knees, she wrapped her arms about his legs and wept. Great, wrenching sobs escaped her, and, perhaps for the first time in her life, they were not entirely disingenuous. "Oh, Warren, thank you for coming for me. You must help me. Please, please, I cannot bear it," she pleaded.
"I'm afraid I can't help you, Francis. You've done things that are beyond my powers to fix,"
he replied coolly.
"Get up off the floor. It's cold, and you must think of your child."
"Warren, I can't have a child in a place such as this," Francis implored. "There must be something you can do, and if not you, Eldrin. I know he has no affection for me, but surely, under such circumstances—"
"You seduced one of his servants and then murdered the boy,"
Warren snapped.
"Are those the circumstances you mean? You lied to him and to everyone else, claiming that I had raped you and fathered a child on you, when it was that poor young footman's all along. It's unnecessary to even address all the ways you have tormented both my brother and his new bride. No, Francis, for once I'm afraid you have made your bed, and you will have no choice but to lie in it."
It wasn't working. His heart had hardened against her completely. Not only that, but he seemed to have somehow developed some iron will that had always escaped him previously. "How can you be so cold to me? Yes, I was unfaithful, but I didn't murder Charles. It was self-defense. He would have killed me in a jealous rage, just as he'd tried to murder you." Warren laughed, but it was a cold sound, more derisive than amused.
"Francis, you have never carried your sewing basket anywhere. I'm not even sure why you have the thing, as I've never seen you use it. I'm more surprised that the shears inside it were not so dull from rust and age that they had been rendered useless."
"What on earth do you mean by that?" she said, struggling to get up from the floor. She moved away from him, fearful that in her fury she might do something regrettable and make her situation worse.
"Francis, for you to have those scissors with you anywhere in the house besides your chamber can only mean that you had taken them on your person with intent that they would be used for a wicked purpose."
"You truly will not help me, will you?" she asked.
"You are beyond my help,"
he replied simply.
"I think perhaps you always were."
Francis considered her options. There was only one. Or kill it.
"What?"
"The child in my belly. I will kill it," she threatened. Then, without warning, she hurled herself onto the floor, quickly turning her face away so that it would not be too damaged. The pain was jarring, her teeth rattling from it. There was a sharp pain in her abdomen, but then it simply stopped. A coldness began to grow in the room, the temperature dropping so quickly and so shockingly that she could see her breath.
"What have you done, Francis?"
Warren asked. She heard fear in his voice then. They both had reason to be terrified. Forcing herself to get up, she was on her knees, screeching at him. "I warned you. I told you what I would do if you did not get me out of here. Now we will both pay the price." The small bit of light that filtered through the accursed window vanished into nothingness. The sky outside was black as pitch, and thunder rumbled ominously in the distance.
"It was clear and bright only moments ago,"
Warren said.
"What sort of devil's bargain have you made, Francis, that the darkness of Cuscod Liss followed you here?"
"I offered the child in exchange for power," Francis admitted, "and my offer was accepted."
Warren stared at her in horror. Following shortly on the heels of their grandiose wedding, he'd seen the writing on the wall. Frances was not who he had thought her to be. There was nothing kind or lovely about her. Her pretty face had hidden a viperous heart and a grasping nature. But what she'd just disclosed to him was beyond anything he could imagine. That she would barter her unborn child was abhorrent to him.
"Do not look at me like that,"
she shouted. Like what? He asked.
"As if I was some grotesque monster. You don't know what it's like, Warren. You've never felt that kind of power. You've never been sensitive to it."
But he had. He'd felt it more times than he could count, and he'd run from it, hidden from it, and dove headfirst into a bottle when necessary in order to escape it. The difference between them was greed. Frances craved, always, what she could not have, and that included power. "If you harm the child, Frances," he warned, "there will be no aid from our quarter. I'm not certain the devil himself could spare you then." She smirked at him.
"Think carefully before you make such proclamations, husband. If this child is allowed to be born, then the evil that inhabits the shadows of Cuscod-Lys will be made flesh, and all the darkness contained within the walls of your crumbling home will spill out into the world. No one will be safe then."
He wanted to believe it was simply another of her lies or machinations, but as she gloated in front of him, he knew that it was true. She wasn't mad, but she was maniacal, and he could see it in her clearly. "You will burn in hell for what you have done here."
"And you will not burn with me? Is it not the purpose of a husband to be the spiritual leader of his house? Had you not been a drunkard, more focused on your bottle of brandy than what was happening around you, would you not have seen what was occurring? I may have done it, Warren, but you are not without blame."
The words were clipped, bitten off angrily as she all but barked at him with rage. More truths, though even harder to take, he thought. Taking a step back, he tapped on the heavy door with one knuckle. "I'm ready to leave this place," he called out. A moment later, the sound of grating metal was followed by the appearance of the same attendant in the open doorway. "Right here, sir. Happy to be of service." Warren started to walk out, but as an afterthought, he retrieved several coins from his pocket and passed them to the guard. "Make her comfortable here. Her own clothes, clean water to wash, and decent food. If you do that, I'll see to it that you are well compensated." "Of course, sir, of course. Happy to do so," the man said. "They call me Tom Willard, sir." "Thank you, Mr. Willard. It is much appreciated," Warren said, and left the building without a backward glance. He couldn't look back. He couldn't let himself think of Frances, because if he did, he'd dive straight into a bottle of brandy and never come up again. There was another reason not to look back. He could feel the darkness on him. It hovered on his back like a weight, its icy breath cold on his neck, and the whisper of it on his skin like a crawling thing. Perhaps Frances wasn't the only mad person.
Chapter 4. Adelaide walked the long corridor toward her chambers. Eldrin was in the library with Lord Mortimer. Madame Leola was resting. Her friend was recovering from Frances's vicious attack, but she still tired easily. A sense of disquiet had been hovering over her since that morning. Try as she might, Adelaide could not quite understand why. Despite the appearance of Agrita as that awful creature the night before, oozing and grotesque, things had been strangely quiet of late. Why? What was Agrita planning? A door swung open at the end of the hall, and a giggling maid burst forth. followed by a footman. Adelaide stopped in her tracks and waited. As the maid turned, her face fell, and she quickly bobbed a curtsy. She was newer to the house, Adelaide thought, and had only been there for a few weeks. "I'm terribly sorry, milady. I didn't mean to disturb you," the maid offered. "What were you doing in that room?" The question was directed to the footman. He blushed.
My lady, I
needed to clean under a piece of furniture, milady. There was something black all over the floor, and I couldn't move it by myself. He helped,"
the maid explained, and then elbowed the footman so hard that he grunted. Doubtful, Adelaide demanded, "Show me." While she had no wish to act as a tyrant over the servants, for their own sake, some things could not be allowed. The maid was painfully young, and if the footman was dallying with her without honorable intentions, it would not be tolerated. The maid bobbed another curtsy and hurried back to the chamber she'd just vacated.
"It was Mrs. Llewellyn's room, milady. There was something black all under the dressing table yon."
Adelaide entered the room and immediately wished she had not. She could feel Francis's presence. Was it possible to be haunted by the living? The need, the craven things Francis had done in that space, the wickedness of her very nature seemed to have infiltrated every stone and fiber. It was cloying and suffocating, and she wanted nothing more than to turn and flee.
"Just there, milady,"
the maid said, and pointed to the spot on the floor. Forcing herself to follow the gesture, Adelaide looked at the floor. It was wet, the wood appearing darker in that spot than any others.
"I tried everything I know to clean it, but I can't get that stain out, milady. I meant to ask Mr. Tromley if he knew of anything that might work,"
the girl said nervously. Adelaide didn't answer. She couldn't. With her eyes glued to that dark spot on the floor, she watched as the same thick black substance that had covered the creature the night before began to ooze up from between the floorboards. It came from the very grain of the wood, as if Cuscotlis itself were giving birth to evil. "Do you see it?" Adelaide whispered. The maid stared at the floor.
"The stain, milady, or is there something else?"
They couldn't see it. Only she could. Or would Eldrin and Madame Leola be able to see that as well? Striving for a neutral tone, Adelaide said, "Yes, the stain. That's all. I'm certain it's fine. And in the future, if you require the assistance of a footman to help you with something like this, have another maid present as well. Propriety must be maintained." The maid, chastened, bobbed another curtsy.
"Yes, milady, I'm terribly sorry."
Adelaide spared a quelling look at the footman. "And you know better. You've been here for how long?"
4 years, my lady,"
the footman replied. "If it happens again, I'll be forced to report the incident to my husband and to Tromley."
"Bitch."
The word was an insidious hiss. It came from the footman's mouth, just as the same black muck spilled from his lips. Adelaide drew back, appalled by what he'd said, but more appalled that Agrita's voice had emerged from him. She glanced to the maid, who stood beside her. The girl was smiling, black oozing from between her parted lips, and her eyes gleaming with an evil light.
"Go and tell your husband,"
the maid sneered, Agrita's rasp rattling from her.
"Tell him."
"Get away from me," Adelaide said, stumbling back. She tried to make for the door, but the footman was there, blocking her path. "Get away!"
"You're weak, a wretched, pathetic thing. Do you think you can destroy me? Even that book you've guarded so jealously will not tell you how. I am eternal, even when I take the flesh born of that whore." who even now rots in the asylum. No power on earth will ever stop me.
The maid's skin began to blacken and shrivel, drawing taut over her bones. It was like the horrible mummies Adelaide had seen in the museums. Adelaide drew in a deep breath and screamed. She screamed with all the force and volume she could muster. It had been a dreadful error to wander the house alone, even in the bright light of day. Her only hope was to draw someone she trusted to her aid, either Eldrin or Leola, even Lord Mortimer. But in that moment, alone and feeling far too vulnerable, she knew she had overplayed her hand.
Eldrin had been climbing the stairs in search of his wife when he heard the scream. He broke into a run, climbing the stairs as quickly as he could. He reached the top and waited. Adelaide shouted again, and he couldn't tell if she was crying out from fear or pain. His blood pounded in his veins, his entire body tensed and ready to fight whatever it was that threatened her. Still, he followed the sound. When he finally reached her, he found her on her knees in Francis's chamber. A footman and a maid stood there, both of them seemingly perplexed by her behavior. The footman said nothing, just stared helplessly at his mistress, who appeared to have lost her mind. The maid, however, was crying, her lower lip trembling terribly, and great glistening tears rolling down her cheeks.
"My lord, I don't know what happened,"
the maid said, her words tumbling out in a rush.
"I only meant to show her ladyship the stain on the floor, and then she began screaming. I don't know what to do for her."
"Leave us,"
he said.
"I'll tend to her."
The maid and the footman rushed out, and Eldrin squatted down on his haunches in front of his hysterical wife. She had covered her face with her hands and refused to look at him.
"Adelaide, they're gone."
"I'm afraid to look,"
she said.
"I'm afraid she will make me see something else horrible."
Eldrin grasped her wrists, tugging her hands down and forcing her to look at him.
"She is not here. Not now, at any rate."
Adelaide shook her head, tears clinging to her lashes.
"She's always here. You know that as well as I do. I was complacent and overly confident. I underestimated her."
"Perhaps we have all been underestimating her. We cannot take it for granted that we know all of her tricks. Let us leave this place. I fear we are suffering from Francis's wicked influence in here, as well as Agrida's."
Reluctantly, she placed one hand in his.
"Let's go to our chambers, and let's have this room boarded up so that no one enters it again. It will forever be tainted by Francis's wickedness, I think."
It wasn't something they would need to worry about for long, but in the interim, he would have it locked and sealed.
"I'll see to it. Come along. Let's get away from here."
"I'm sorry, Eldrin,"
she said as they stepped into the corridor.
"This was a deplorably weak moment. It was just that—"
"What is it?"
he asked.
"What did you see?"
Adelaide cocked her head to one side.
"More than she meant for me to, I think. But we cannot discuss it here."
"We cannot go down to the beach tonight. It'll be dark soon, and the tide is in. It's too dangerous."
"Then we will go to the village and seek shelter in the church. Will Father Thomas mind if we descend upon him?"
"Hardly. I think Barton has finished his translations now, at any rate. The man is ecstatic at having been given the opportunity," Eldrin answered. "Should we wake Madame Leola?"
"Yes, I'll need her insight. Oh, dear, how do you think Father Thomas will respond to her presence?"
Eldrin smiled a bit, thinking of his old friend's shocked expression. "I dare say he will welcome her. He will not know what to make of her, but he will welcome her."
Chapter 5. The carriage rolled along the lane between ancient buildings. their upper floors cantilevered over the lower ones in the old style. They'd spoken loudly of needing to alter the previous wedding arrangements as they'd left Cwsgodlys and would be dining in town with the good father to do so. With the four of them packed inside, it was rather tight, but as Adelaide was seated next to her husband, their thighs brushing as the carriage swayed, she found she did not mind it at all. It wasn't always about passion. There was something comforting in his touch, his nearness. Being close to him made her feel anchored and safe. That sort of feeling was a rare commodity, given their current predicament.
"It's rather nice to get out,"
Lord Mortimer mused.
"and I must say this village is rather charming."
"So it is,"
Eldrin agreed.
"Familiarity has prompted me to take it for granted."
"Be mindful you do not overdo so with your wife,"
Lord Mortimer warned, with a hearty laugh, clearly amused by his own wit. "Or your travelling companion," Madame Leola pointed out, in a skewering tone. Lord Mortimer's laughter faded immediately, and he nodded.
"Just so, my dear, just so."
Adelaide turned her face toward the window as she bit back a smile. It was good to see them laughing and teasing one another. While certain aspects of their relationship were new, their interactions with one another belied it. Their long acquaintance had created a kind of intimacy that not even the most passionate physical intimacy could match. "That's the church, just up ahead," she said, and pointed through the window to the well-lit structure. It was a pretty chapel, though small by most standards, hewn from local stone and graced with stained glass windows that were unusually beautiful and artistically detailed. It was a fine example of Gothic architecture.
"What is the Reverend's name again?"
"It's Reverend Thomas Underhill, Lord Mortimer,"
Eldrin answered.
"but most people call him Father Thomas here. I suppose they've never fully sacrificed their Catholic customs."
"And the good Reverend doesn't mind?" Leola asked. "He must be very forward-thinking." Eldrin chuckled.
"I would never classify him as forward-thinking. I would, however, classify him as one of the kindest people I've ever known. He's simply good to his core. I think that you will like him."
"A better question would be whether or not he were like me," Madame Leola replied. "I think most men of the cloth have a very firm opinion of women, such as myself." Adelaide looked at her friend. Father Thomas grew up at Cwsgodlys. His father worked there. I think you will find him to be far more open-minded when it comes to dealing with such difficult places than any other man of the cloth you have encountered. Mollified by that explanation, Madame Leola nodded. "We shall soon see." The carriage rolled onto the small lane that spanned the front of the church and rectory. As they disembarked, music could be heard coming from within the church, but Father Thomas appeared in the doorway of his small home.
"The organist is checking that all is well. It was tuned just yesterday,"
Father Thomas offered.
"Come in, my friends. Thanks to the generosity of Lord Montkeith's kitchens, we have a feast laid before us, and I cannot wait to partake of it."
Eldrin entered first, Adelaide at his side, with Lord Mortimer and Madame Leola at the rear. Mr. Barton was seated before the fire and rose as they entered. The book was sitting on the side table with a stack of leather-bound journals and sheafs of paper beside it.
"As dinner has already been laid, we shall eat and talk all at once,"
Father Thomas said, and led them all through to the small dining room. It was a tight fit, and gathered around the ancient, scarred table, they were all jumbled knees and elbows. But it was cozy in the end. Father Thomas said grace, keeping it rather short and sweet. Then they were all seated, and they all served themselves from the many dishes that had been sent down from Cwsgodlys.
"Now, with our plates full and our hearts and minds open,"
Father Thomas said,
"what vile thing has brought you here?"
"Where is Agrida's final resting place?" Adelaide asked.
Why would you ask that?
Eldrin demanded. "Because I think I must destroy Quisgodlis. But I think if we do not also destroy what remains of her, we will be doomed to fail." "Does it say so in that book, Mr. Barton?" Adelaide asked. Mr. Barton frowned.
"I'm afraid it doesn't. The last entry in the book is what you suspected. It was a spell or incantation, and one like I've never read before. It bound her to the house, merging her essence, for lack of a better word, with that of the house. I would assume, then, that she remains within it. But the question of where is one I cannot answer."
"The cellars,"
Eldrin said.
"There are many dark, dank places down there. There is one possibility. We could ask Frances."
Everyone gasped, but it was Madame Leola who answered. "And receive nothing but lies for your trouble. She's a murderer, a liar, and a woman who would sacrifice her own child through some dark magic ritual to have the power of Agrita. Do you really think she'd ever tell you the truth?" Mr. Barton guffawed.
"Why, I translated the book, but all this is madness. Surely none of you believe these things are real. Thomas, you must say something."
Father Thomas shook his head.
"I understand your disbelief, but I sit here as a man of God, and I cannot deny these things they speak of are real and have occurred here in the place for centuries. There is evil at Quisgodlis. I've felt it myself. Were I a man of lesser faith..."
Barton stared from one to the other of them, and while clearly not convinced, he did appear to be compelled by their conviction, specifically Father Thomas's.
"What do you need of me?"
"Is there any reference to a hiding space she would utilize, or any secret chamber that was her refuge?" Madame Leola asked.
"Well, she talked about a room in the cellars of the keep. It wasn't a grand house then. Most of what is Quisgodlis now has been cobbled together over the past few centuries around that original structure. Is the interior of the ancient keep still intact, Lord Montkeith?"
Barton asked.
"It is, though where the old ends and the new begins it is impossible to tell."
Eldrin replied.
"Less impossible in the cellars, though."
The pieces began to fall into place for Adelaide then, one puzzle piece clicking easily into the next. "That room you used in the cellar," she reasoned. "She'd never had any issue with you being in there until we returned home from Chester. She would not risk you being in there while I was in the house for fear that we would discover her together."
"Not to appear snide or dismissive,"
Lord Mortimer interjected.
"but why you, Lady Montkeith? What is it about you that makes you such a threat to her?"
"Because I'm not descended from Alwyn Llewellyn," Adelaide stated flatly. "I'm a descendant of Agrita herself." Father Thomas leaned forward, clearly pushed at the turn of events.
"How is that possible? Agrita was the only survivor of her village, and all of her offspring were also born of Alwyn."
Mr. Barton stood up.
"There is something in the book that pertains to that. Let me get my notes."
The older man rushed off and returned moments later with the entire stack of journals and the book. He was flipping through them as he walked. As he neared the table, he held up one of them and said,
"Aha! Here it is. Agrita mentioned in passing that the body of her younger sister was never found. She personally inspected the dead to make sure that all members of her family were accounted for, but a wee girl apparently vanished in the heat of battle."
Adelaide knew then it was time to confess all. "My mother came to me in a dream. She told me that the only surviving member of Agrita's family was taken in by Romani. I am the only one who can destroy her because her blood runs in my veins."
"How?"
"You must consecrate her grave with your blood." Everyone in the room grew silent. After a long moment, the silence stretching between those present. Adelaide broke it. The black figure looming over me last night? And today, she manipulated my vision of the maid so that young girl would wear her horrible face, Adelaide said. I thought that she looked like the mummies I'd seen in museums in Paris and London, and then I thought of the peat bogs and the bodies they had discovered there that are believed to be thousands of years old and still preserved. If she were buried in the dirt in that cellar, would the soil here preserve her that way?
It could,
Mr. Barton said.
It's similar enough to those bogs, right there on the edge of the moor. It is quite possible she may have prepared a peat tomb for herself in an effort to preserve her body.
The incantation you mentioned,
Eldrin began.
You said it was unlike anything you'd ever read before. Why?
Mr. Barton shook his head.
The wording was so specific, my lord. So long as her remains are intact, and so long as they rest upon the soil of Cuscord Liss, it states, she will be eternal. That the stone and wood of that house are her bones, and the water flowing in it and under it are her blood. It was very intricately written.
We must find her body. We must consecrate it with my blood, and we must bury her, Adelaide insisted. It is the only way.
The churchyard is holy ground,
Father Thomas said.
We could bury her there in secret.
No, Adelaide said. We will bury her on the moor, and then we will destroy the house so that no source of power remains for her. The moor has its own power, you see. Just uttering the words made her feel sick. It was a gargantuan and dangerous undertaking, and yet she knew it was the only way. As with so many other things, and Perleola's instruction, instinct had led her to make the statement, and it resounded with truth for her. It was the only way.
It is too dangerous, and I forbid it,
Eldrin said sharply. You cannot, Adelaide said simply.
I can and I will. I am your husband. If you seek to do this, she will know what we are about, and everything we have seen of her so far will pale in comparison to the horror she will visit upon us then.
Eldrin insisted. Lord Montkeith, Leola began. Adelaide is right. It is the only way, and we will do what we must to offset Agrita's tricks and games. We will search together. Adelaide can give up a vial of her blood for each of us. Father Thomas can tell us what words to say to consecrate her body in a holy way. Then we will remove it to the moor, and the dead who linger there will not allow her to roam. Not ever again.
Their plan, my lord, as bizarre as it sounds,
Barton explained,
does address every aspect of the incantation, essentially undoing it line by line. You see, Agrita used her blood to bind herself to the house, just as she'd used her blood to bind the spirits of her family to the moor when they were slaughtered.
Adelaide reached for Eldrin's hand, holding it in both of hers. We must do this. Isn't the chance to be free of her for all our tomorrows worth the danger we face today?
Nothing is worth the danger of losing you,
he replied.
Nothing.
I can't, Eldrin. I can't let her continue to torment you and everyone else here. She must be stopped, no matter the cost.
I will pray for all of you, and I will provide shelter in the church for all of the staff,
Father Thomas said.
For what it is worth, my friend, I believe that your wife is correct. It is time to free yourself from this accursed evil.
Chapter 6. Following the disclosure of Adelaide's ridiculous and unnecessarily risky plan, dinner had become a very subdued affair. The silence in the carriage as they rode back toward Cuscord Liss was deafening. The only sound was the creaking of carriage wheels and the clomping of horses' hooves. The tension was palpable. As they neared the house, it only got worse. The closer they came to the source of all their fears and worries, the more they all seemed to feel the pressure of it. Madame Leola and Lord Mortimer disembarked first, leaving Adelaide and Eldrin alone in the carriage. Eldrin climbed down and then offered his hand, but as her feet touched the ground, she heard him let out a muffled curse.
"Bryn, I'll take the lantern if you please. Her ladyship and I are going for a walk,"
Eldrin said to the driver. "In the dark, my lord," the driver said.
"Yes, in the dark,"
Eldrin snapped. "There's a package in the carriage. Have it taken inside."
To Madame Leola only, Bryn,
Adelaide said.
"We cannot afford to let that very important information get mislaid."
Eldrin wished fervently that she had never found that blasted book. It seemed that it had brought nothing but trouble. Taking the lantern from the clearly troubled driver, Eldrin took Adelaide's hand in his and headed in the direction of the path to the beach. If they were going to speak freely, it seemed the only place to do so. He needed more than half answers. Neither uttered a word until their feet sank into the sand.
"Why are you so upset?"
Adelaide asked.
"I'm not upset, Adelaide.
I'm terrified. I'm terrified that what we are about to do will go horribly, catastrophically wrong," he replied, "and I need some assurances from you, as well as a more detailed explanation of many, many things."
"What things, Eldrin? You're being unreasonable."
"On the contrary," he said, "I'm the only person who continues to be reasonable. Madame Leola makes no sense at all half the time. Lord Mortimer is so enamored of her that he cannot see anything else. And you, it's all dreams and instinct and just knowing. You were, upon your arrival here, one of the most pragmatic women I've ever encountered in my life. And now, I don't know what to make of you." She pulled her hand from his.
"I see. Lord Mortimer is so enamored of Leola, he simply humors her. But you cannot humor me. You must challenge these foolish notions that I'm now given to. Is that correct? Or have I misunderstood?"
He sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I didn't mean it that way. Everything you have predicted, everything you have seen thus far has been accurate. But this, Adelaide, what you suggested at dinner is a risk unlike anything else we've undertaken, and I can't walk blindly into that."
"I've walked blindly into everything. Marrying you, this house, and all the horrible things that are inherently part of it, and I wouldn't change any of it. I realize this plan may sound extreme, Eldrin, but it's the only way."
"Why?" he asked. "If all it takes is someone with Egrida's blood, why hasn't anyone else discovered this over the years?"
"Because there's been no one here who had Egrida's blood that did not also have the cursed Llewellyn blood in their veins. It's all in the books."
"But you haven't read them," he pointed out. "So how do you know that?" She shook her head.
"I cannot explain it. Perhaps as Madame Leola has her spirit guide, my mother has become mine. She's been leading me to this moment with none of us being the wiser."
Eldrin stepped away from her and stared out at the black, black water. "Adelaide, Egrida's stock in trade is to twist your memories and use them against you. How can you be certain it's truly your mother?"
"You said it yourself. Egrida twists things, so I can't know, and I can't be certain. It's very possible that I only know these things and feel these things because I do have a blood connection to Egrida, because as horrid as she is somehow a part of me."
Adelaide replied softly. "You are not her. You are nothing like her," Eldrin insisted. "There isn't a shred of wickedness inside you. You wouldn't hurt anyone."
And she doesn't have the capability not to cause pain. If it were her presenting as my mother, it would be something dark and twisted. And I think there is a reason that I have not seen my mother until my dream. It's because my mother has been shielding her presence from Agrita so that it could not be used that way. My blood is a threat to her because it does not bear the curse of your line. She killed her own children, specifically her daughters, because the power of her line was passed only to the females. There has been no one with the power to end this until I came. I know that.
"Do you not find that convenient?" he said with a bitter laugh.
I find it to be fate,
she said.
Fate led me here. Fate led us to one another. We have the ability to save one another, but not if we allow fear to turn us against each other.
Facing her once more, he bit out the words angrily. "I'm not turning against you, Adelaide. I'm doing my absolute damnedest not to lose you. I couldn't bear it." As declarations went, shouting angrily about how much he loved her was probably not the best way to convey the depths of his feelings, but in their present circumstances, he wasn't certain what else to do. She walked toward him and wrapped her arms about his waist, pressing herself against him.
Please, Eldrin, there are things I do not understand. Things about myself that are new and different, and yes, terrifying. But I have to believe that I was brought here for a reason, that fate brought us together. Otherwise, all that we've suffered at her hands has been for naught. Can you trust me? Can you trust in that?
"I have no choice," he replied. "She won't stop. I know that. And in truth, there has been more activity and more revelations about what is occurring here since you came than ever before. But I fear that this is invading your mind, that it is taking you over, and I do not want that. So many of my ancestors became obsessed with it in one way or another, either attempting and failing to defeat her time and again, or seeking to serve her in an effort to curry favor."
I am not your ancestors. I am her descendant, and that is why I am different from all the others. I promise you, we will prevail. Tomorrow morning, get the charges and bring them home. We'll set them throughout the house. On the morning of Christmas Eve, all the servants will go off to church in their finest clothes, and the four of us, Madame Leola, Lord Mortimer, and the two of us, will remain behind and find her wretched bones.
How? The cellars of this house were a maze of tunnels and God knows what else long before she wrecked them with a gas explosion, he pointed out. It might take longer than a church service.
I will know. My mother will guide me, or Madame Leola's spirit guide will lead her. But one of us shall discover her resting place, and we shall bring this to an end. Have faith, my love.
Eldrin pulled her closer, holding her tightly. Faith was in short supply for him. A commotion in the distance caught his eye. Eldrin looked up and saw one of the footmen hastening down the path. My lord, you must come quickly. It's Mr. Llewellyn."
"Warren?"
"Aye, my lord," the footman replied breathlessly.
"He's pacing and muttering under his breath about things, dark things."
Eldrin let out a heavy sigh. "He's drinking." "No, my lord," the footman said. "He's sober as my Aunt Rosie, and she's a Quaker."
We should go,
Adelaide said.
He went to see Francis today. After all, heaven knows what might have occurred.
Warren paced the length of the hall, careful never to step foot out of the fullness of the light. Every flicker of the glass lamps made his heart race. The dark shadows he'd seen in the small room at the sanitarium where Francis was being held had seemed to stay with him, clinging to him in ways that made his skin crawl. Everywhere he looked, he saw black, hulking shapes. He'd felt their icy touch as he left that building, so much so that he hadn't been able to bring himself to climb inside the carriage for the journey home. He'd ridden atop on the box with the coachman. It felt as if they were closing in on him, wrapping around him and slowly choking the life out of him. Was this it for him? Had he given up drink only to be driven mad? At first, he'd thought it was his imagination, or that perhaps seeing Francis had affected him more than he'd initially realized. The truth was that he'd never truly loved his wife, but he had loved the idea of her. He'd loved who she presented herself to be in the beginning, though that had been, in fact, nothing more than a piece of elaborately crafted fiction. But he'd come to realize as he'd looked over his shoulder on the journey home, as he'd felt the weight and malice of every shadow since, that it was more than just overwrought feelings or an overactive imagination. Now, without the numbing relief of brandy, he was seeing shadows in every corner. They lurked and shifted and undulated like a living thing. Every breath brought them closer. Perhaps it was an irrational fear, but there was a part of him that believed those shadows wanted to invade him, to take him over, as it seemed they had done to Francis long ago.
Mr. Llewellyn, if you will come and sit, I can help you.
The mysterious Madame Leola offered. I cannot, madam, he said firmly. If I stop moving, they will... It was not something he could utter. He would find himself locked in the tower as his mother had been, or perhaps given a neighboring cell to Francis. Then he would be at their mercy.
I promise they will not harm you, if you let me help,
she insisted. They? He did stop then, and looked at her. You see them. Tell me what you see, else I should assume you are simply humoring me as one would a madman.
The shadows in this house are more than simply a play of light and darkness,
the mystic said.
They pose a genuine threat, but I have a way of keeping them from you, if you will trust me.
The sound of footsteps prompted Warren to turn. Eldrin and Adelaide had been summoned to corral him, it seemed. I'm not insane. I am not imagining things, nor am I hallucinating. And I am not drunk. It was his sister-in-law who stepped forward then. She closed the distance between them and took his hand in hers. It was a kind touch, one of comfort, and somehow it eased him.
No, you are not. We have all seen things here that defy explanation,
she said, with a compassion that humbled him. It isn't only that. I feel, Adelaide, it feels as if they are hunting me, as if I am to be taken over by them at any moment. It sounded mad to his own ears.
Let Madame Leola help you, Warren. I promise that she will keep you safe from these things if you let her,
Adelaide said.
I swear it.
Warren looked at her. It's easier just to drink it all away. Not this time. That'll only make you more vulnerable. We must all keep our wits about us now, Eldrin said, approaching him. Have a little faith, brother. It seems that is a request being made of us both at the moment. Warren frowned, catching on to the fact that a great deal was intentionally being left unsaid. What are you about, Eldrin? I cannot say. I can only tell you that we will do everything possible for all of us to be free of this. His brother's resolute expression swayed Warren.
There were few people he trusted, but no one more than Eldrin. Had Eldrin not saved him from their brother, after all? Had he not strode onto the moor and faced the thing they all feared in order to prevent Alden from hurting anyone else? Then, let this mystic do what she will to save what is left of my sanity, he relented. Madame Leola looked to one of the maids standing nearby.
Get the salt from the kitchens.
How much salt, ma'am?
The maid asked with a frown.
All of it.
Adelaide answered.
Bring it all.
Chapter 7. With Warren settled in his chamber, lights blazing, and a circle of salt surrounding his bed, Tromley had elected to remain in the room with him. The trusted family retainer had suggested that it would be better for everyone if he were to watch over Warren through the night. For her part, Adelaide was in agreement. As they were preparing to leave to seek their own chamber, Eldrin spoke to the butler.
In light of recent events, Lord Mortimer and Madame Leola have elected to delay their nuptials until their return to London. But, as arrangements were already made for the servants to attend, Father Thomas has agreed to hold a special service for you all at the church Christmas Eve morning, in honor of the holiday. I'd like all the servants to attend. All, my lord? There will be no one to tend you here,
the butler protested.
We can fend for ourselves for a short time.
In a softer tone.
It's imperative, Tromley, that everyone is in attendance. Do you understand? Make the arrangements, but do it discreetly. No one must think they are being forced to leave. Are they, my lord?
Tromley asked.
It's for the best,
Eldrin said.
There will be food, drink, and musicians at the assembly rooms for everyone. That should be all the inducement they require. I'll see to it, my lord.
Adelaide watched the exchange with gratitude. They would proceed as planned. We'll be placing Christmas greenery throughout the house tomorrow as well, Adelaide interjected. Please make sure that duties are assigned accordingly, so that some of the maids will be free to assist with that project. Dilys and 2 others who can be discreet if necessary.
Yes, my lady,
Tromley replied.
You will have all the assistance you require with anything you wish to do.
It was clear that the butler understood they were speaking of far more than holiday decorations. Thank you, Tromley. Thank you for everything you do, Adelaide offered with heartfelt gratitude. As they left the chamber, Adelaide glanced back at Warren. He was lying on the bed, but he stared up at the ceiling, his eyes wide and his body tense. She feared for him. She feared that what was to occur in the next day and a half would damage him beyond repair. In the corridor, when the door closed softly behind them, Eldrin took her hand.
He will be fine. I think that if he can manage to sleep tonight, he will have a better outlook tomorrow, and things will improve.
Adelaide sighed. I certainly hope so. I'm afraid for him. For all of us.
Tomorrow is soon enough to worry,
he said, looking at her with an intensity that she had come to recognize.
For tonight, let us go and make ourselves forget all of it. Tonight is for us.
A thrill raced through her. Anticipation sparked her pulse to race and her body to heat in response. You're not angry with me anymore?
I'm never angry with you, only with our situation. But for now, there are many things I wish to do with you, and none of them involve arguing,
he said. Adelaide didn't hesitate. She turned and walked to their chamber. As she reached the door, she turned and looked back at him over her shoulder. I think, perhaps, you should demonstrate precisely what you mean by that." Opening the chamber door, she stepped inside and waited. Only seconds later, he followed, closing the door behind them and closeting them away from everything and everyone else. She felt his hands upon her, coasting over her shoulders and down her arms, pulling her back against him. He leaned forward, his lips pressing against the tender skin of her neck in a way that robbed her of breath. Adelaide tilted her head to the side, giving him freer access. The scrape of his teeth over her flesh, the rush of pleasure at that passionate gesture that, while not painful, was far from gentle, had her eyes fluttering closed as a soft moan escaped her lips. She felt his hands move from her arms, the whisper of a touch as they moved around to the row of buttons at the back of her dress. One by one, those buttons were freed until the dress sagged. With a gentle push, he sent the fabric sliding downward until it pulled at her feet. Her corset was next. He loosened the laces, and the rush of air that came in the wake of that left her as light-headed as his kisses. Piece by piece, he stripped her clothes from her until she stood before him, wearing only her stockings and garters. His hands roamed over her freely then, touching her everywhere, stoking a fire in her blood as heat coiled in her belly. She started to turn in his arms, to face him, but he stopped her. His hands gripped her hips, and he guided her, turning her slightly until they were facing the large mirror of her dressing table. He stood behind her, fully clothed, his hands moving proprietarily over her, and she could do nothing but stare. A part of her felt as if she should be embarrassed, but another part of her was simply overwhelmed with the erotic image on display before her.
"If there is one thing I wish,"
he said, his breath hot against her neck,
"it is that you could see yourself as I do. So tonight, I mean to worship you here and have you observe the perfection I see in you."
She couldn't form a protest. Her mouth opened, but no sound escaped her as she watched him cup her breasts in his hands, the tips of his fingers teasing her nipples to hard, aching peaks. The breath shuddered from her lungs, and had he not been so close to her that his body supported her weight, she would have simply sank to the floor. Even as her desire spiked, and a need unlike anything she'd ever experienced blossomed within her, one of his hands dipped lower, his fingertips trailing lightly over her ribs and the softness of her stomach. He slipped it between her thighs and touched her intimately, stroking the sensitive bud shielded there. Her gaze trapped by the vision of their reflection. It traveled upward until she met his gaze in the mirror. It was so intimate, so erotic. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. She was helpless to do anything but feel.
Eldrin watched her intently, every shudder and sigh, every tremor that racked her beautiful body. The fullness of her breasts, and the lush, pink buds of her nipples, and the dark curls that shielded her sex. While he craved the release he could find within her welcoming heat, there was a pleasure in and of itself, simply in touching her, in evoking such a heated and intense response from her, stroking the soft folds, teasing her fevered arousal, he savored the opportunity to touch her. Every touch, every movement was intended to inflame her further, and it succeeded. Her lips parted on a broken sigh. She clutched at his arms, not to pull him away, but to hold him to her as her muscles tensed with pleasure. As he felt the spasms of her release, he continued stroking her flesh, drawing that pleasure out as she sobbed from the intensity of it. Only when she collapsed against him did he halt. Even then, it was only to scoop her into his arms and carry her back to the bed. Depositing her there, he shed his own clothes and joined her. She welcomed him instantly, parting her thighs and drawing him to her. Entering her, her exquisite softness closing around his hardness, Eldrin uttered a harsh curse as he struggled to find some sense of control. Then she moved against him, arching her hips and locking her legs about his waist, drawing him deeper. Christ, Adelaide, this will be over before we've begun.
I don't care. Do not hold yourself back from me. You wanted my passion, and I gave it to you. Now, give me yours,
she urged. He was helpless to resist, not when the thing she asked for was the thing he most desired. It became a frenzied thing, a rush of heat and need as he thrust into her. Neither was it gentle. He took her forcefully, and she met him stroke for stroke, her body rising to meet his. A part of him knew that he should withdraw, that he should have used one of the condoms they had purchased, but those thoughts could not overpower raw need. He needed to lose himself inside her. He needed the release of spilling himself within her. He needed to make her his in the most primal way that any man could claim a woman. He felt the familiar tightening, all the telltale signs of his impending release, and he felt the silken flesh of her thighs as they gripped his hips. Bringing one hand to her hip, his fingers dug into that soft flesh as he pressed deep and felt the dam break inside him. Eldrin shuddered against her, his body jerking and trembling with the force of his release as she clung to him. The sound of their ragged breathing filled the room, and for that moment it felt as if they were the only people in the world. The darkness that threatened them, that hovered over them like a black storm cloud, could be forgotten for the moment. It was a moment of peace and contentment in the midst of terror and turmoil, and they'd savor it together. Chapter 8. Eldrin stood on the platform at the train station with Warren by his side. His brother was jumpy, nervous, and not fully recovered from whatever had occurred the night before. It had been Adelaide's suggestion that he include Warren in his morning errand. His brother would have to be told of their plan at some point. "What are we doing here?" Warren asked. "We are meeting the foreman from the mine. He is delivering garlands and wreaths to decorate the house with," Eldrin answered as he checked his watch. It was after 10, and the train was late. Warren rolled his eyes, clearly unimpressed with the decision. "We have never decorated for Christmas. Why now? In the midst of all that is happening, it seems rather frivolous and pointless." "It is a tradition that Americans, particularly my wife, hold very dear. She wants greenery. Greenery she will have." The remainder of the explanation would wait until they were safely away from the village. There was a crate of dynamite waiting for them,
and when Warren helped him conceal the explosives in the Christmas decor, then he would explain everything. The whistle sounded in the distance, announcing the approaching locomotive. "What's really going on, Eldrin? Are there attendants from the asylum on board ready to snatch me up and lock me in a cell next to my mad woman of a wife? Or perhaps next to my mad woman of a mother?" Eldrin sighed. "No one is going to take you away or lock you up. As for Mother, she is mad. Cusgod Liss and the darkness inside it destroyed her. And as for Frances, she isn't mad. She's evil, avaricious, power-hungry, greedy, and a born liar. But she isn't mad." The train began to slow as it approached the platform, but it was still far enough out they could hear easily enough. "Did you know what she was when I told you I meant to marry her?" "I thought her false, but I didn't know. No one could have known what she truly is. I think at times she does not know herself." Eldrin looked up, saw how near the train was, heard the screaming of brakes and the chugging of wheels. "We're going to destroy the house." Warren looked at him askance. "You can't mean that." "I can. I do. Adelaide and Madame Leola think it is the only way." Warren shook his head. "Do you?" "I don't know," Eldrin answered honestly. "But I'm willing to risk it if there's even a minute chance of ending this torment. And we're going to do it tomorrow." "Is that what this sudden desire to decorate our house of horror for Christmas is all about?" Eldrin shrugged. "What better way to hide explosives?" The train was drawing closer, the noise subsiding as the powerful engines wound down. "We'll discuss it more later, when we can get to a place where we can do so safely." After a small burst of activity, the station settled. Marcanellith was hardly a bustling metropolis, after all. A cart was unloaded from one of the cargo cars, and the foreman of the mines came forward with a young boy whom Eldrin knew to be his son. They both pushed handcarts with crates of woven garlands and wreaths heaped on them. "My lord, you didn't have to come to meet us. I'd have brung it up to the house," the foreman offered. Eldrin shook his head. "You're better off never stepping foot on the cursed land, nor exposing your boy to it." The foreman said nothing, but his expression firmed. Everyone knew about Cusgod Liss, of course. It was whispered about, and terrible stories of it were told to naughty children that they might behave. "We'll take it from here," Warren said. "It's good to get a bit of exercise. We'll load these on the cart." "There's 2 more cases on the train, my lord, including the other items you asked for. We'll fetch them for you." "Thank you, Thompson," Eldrin said, as the foreman and his son walked away to fetch the remaining boxes. Warren was already loading the contents of one handcart onto the small wagon they'd brought with them. In all, it was a quick task. Thompson and the boy returned with the remaining crates. Everything was loaded onto the wagon and covered with a tarp. Eldrin paid the man, giving him a small pouch of coins with instructions on how to divvy it up amongst the families of the miners who had assisted in completing the arrangements. Afterward, they climbed atop the simple bench seat of the cart and headed back toward the source of all their misery. Arrangements would have been made by Madame Leola and Adelaide on their morning walk. They had prepared a place for them to work, concealed in the trees and ringed with the salt crystals that Madame Leola put such store in. "Did the salt work last night?" "It did, actually," Warren admitted. "Silly as I thought it sounded, and perhaps it was only the calming presence of Dromley, but while I could see and sense the presence of those shadows, they kept their distance. That's why I drink, you know. I mean, Frances was part of it, but if I drank myself blind, I didn't see anything. Not the shadows, not my own failures. It was easier then to convince myself that anything that occurred was the result of being intoxicated, and not haunted, I suppose. We've been haunted, and perhaps even hunted since we were born."
"I wouldn't say that you are wrong,"
Eldrin agreed.
"There are things, Warren, that have come to light. We are brothers. We share the same father. But Alden and I were not twins. I was a product of one of Father's many affairs. He forced Mother to raise me as her son, and she did so, until he died, and she went utterly mad. All the times she denied me, she was finally telling the truth."
Warren blinked at him. "That's rather shocking."
"It also means that you are the rightful heir to the county," Eldrin said. "I'm happy enough to hand it over."
"I want no part of it," Warren said. "I'm not fit to be count. Whatever you may think, you were born to it, more so than Alden ever was. You have the gift, Eldrin, of being able to care for others, to take care of everyone around you without losing yourself in it or feeling overwhelmed by it. That's not a skill I possess, and it isn't one I wish to learn at this juncture in my life, if I'm even capable of it."
"It's a lie. If I continue this, I'll be living a lie."
"No, you'll be saving me from taking on a role I'm utterly unsuited for. And since I'm married to Frances, the child she carries, if it is male, would be my heir. She wanted it to be the heir. She intended to usurp Montkeith from the Llewellyns, and I'm disinclined to give her what she wanted." Eldrin sighed.
"There are greater complications related to Frances and her unborn child than you can even begin to imagine, but this is not the place to discuss them."
"Then by all means, let us be off to whatever clandestine activity you have planned for us," Warren agreed with resignation.
Adelaide stared at the small work area they'd set up on the beach. The sky was blue, but there were clouds in the distance. "Let us hope now that it doesn't rain," she said. Madame Leola smiled as she looked at the large salt circle they'd cast. They'd spread out several blankets there where they could work without getting the charges damp. "Fate did not bring us here for a bit of rain to interfere now." Adelaide smiled. "I told Eldrin that it was fate that brought me here. Is that wishful thinking, or is it true? I want it to be, but perhaps it is simply a series of coincidences." "You are the only living descendant of Agrita. Your mother, a poor shop girl with Romani blood, manages to marry one of the wealthiest and most influential men in New York City, who happens to be business partners with a nobleman living in the house that Agrita, for lack of a better word, haunts. Your ship sinks, and you are stuck with such fear at the thought of crossing the ocean. You remain here, marrying a man you barely know, when you are the only one who has the ability to end the curse on his family. Can you honestly think that is coincidence?" "When you put it in those terms, then yes. I suppose it is a bit far-fetched to assume there was not some divine intervention in all of it," Adelaide agreed. "And did you all resolve your difficulties last night?" Leola asked. Adelaide could feel herself blushing. "We did." "He fears for you," Leola said. "He is afraid that he cannot protect you, and also that he will lose you." "And I'm afraid of losing him," Adelaide admitted. "But until this darkness is no longer looming over us, we'll never really have each other anyway." Leola's eyebrows lifted. "I think your husband would beg to differ. The way he looks at you implies that he will have you at any moment." Catching the other woman's sly tone and double entendre, Adelaide glanced up to see Eldrin traipsing through the trees, carrying 2 stacked crates of greenery. Warren was at his heels, and Lord Mortimer, who'd been watching for them, brought up the rear with the remainder.
"There are a few more crates,"
Warren said, as he deposited his boxes inside the circle.
"I'll go back for them." "Wait, and I'll go with you," Lord Mortimer insisted.
None of us should go anywhere alone for the next 24 hours. They are crucial, after all.
Yes, Madame Leola said. More so than anyone here knows. It's imperative that we act now and end this before she grows any stronger. Warren looked at all of them as if they were mad.
Isn't it a bit presumptive to be speaking about all of this here? And what do you mean, her?
Adelaide realized just how far behind he was on all that they had discovered. Until Francis was removed from the picture, it had been too dangerous to tell him anything. Eldrin, you and Lord Mortimer go and retrieve the remaining crates, while Leola and I fill in the gaps in your brother's knowledge.
An excellent plan.
Eldrin agreed. When they had gone, Adelaide pointed to one of the blankets and had him sit there. She began taking the bits of woven greenery from the crate. The wives of the miners had done an excellent job crafting the lovely decorations of pine, yew, and holly. It's rather a shame to destroy them. It's the salt, Leola said, coming to sit beside them. Just as the salt circle protected you last night, the salt that is here, in the sand and the sea, in the very air itself, weakens her, and so she does not come here.
Who is she?
Agrita, Adelaide said. She was a witch in the small village that existed here, outside the keep, all those centuries ago. The moor was their holy place. When Alwyn laid siege to the castle and claimed it for his own, she seduced him. She offered him power and the ability to be undefeated in battle. But there was a cost.
And what was that?
Warren demanded. He would have to make her his wife, and he would have to murder every single man, woman, and child who lived in her village. History had said it was otherwise, that he killed the villagers during the siege. But it was only at her behest.
Why?
She needed a blood sacrifice to cement her power, Leola said, and from the basket at her side drew out some of the notebooks that Mr. Barton had given them. It is all recorded here. Adelaide found her book, her grimoire, and a scholar translated it from Old English into something that even we could understand.
So you're telling me that all the stories I had as a boy about our house being haunted by a medieval warlord were false? And it was actually his witch of a wife all along?
Precisely, Adelaide replied.
And the daughters she supposedly killed because they had no value to him and he only wanted sons?
Adelaide let out a heavy and deeply sad sigh. The females of her line are her weakness. She cursed the Llewellyn blood so that anyone who had it could pose no threat to her. But even then, she knew that a female of her line could bring about her destruction, and that is why the female children have always died so terribly young, and why she hurled her own daughters from the battlements. She killed them and absorbed their energy. Warren shook his head.
Heaven preserve us. If that is what we are descended from, then perhaps we deserve to suffer.
No, you are not her. But Frances means to be. Frances means to sacrifice her own child so that Agrita can be flesh again. She's made a pact with the witch to let her take the child's body and be born into this world again. And she must be stopped. If she succeeds...
What would happen?
Warren demanded. Adelaide couldn't finish. It was too terrible a thought. Leola offered. It would create a chasm in the veil that separates the living and the dead. Because she would become both. And such power, such destruction, would wreak havoc in this world, Mr. Llewellyn. Warren looked at Adelaide then.
And where do you fit into all of this?
Adelaide shrugged. I am the thing she fears most. I have her blood in my veins, but I am not of the Llewellyn line. Nothing more was said as Eldrin and Lord Mortimer returned with the remaining crates. They made quick work of setting out the greenery. Eldrin opened the last crate very carefully and revealed a stack of small paper-wrapped sticks with long fuses. They look rather small and innocuous, Adelaide said with dismay.
Don't let that fool you. Half this box will bring down the house, but I mean to use all of it, to be sure.
Eldrin refused to let anyone else help with wiring the sticks of dynamite into the wreaths and garlands. He considered it too dangerous for anyone but himself. Well, while we're here, we should take care of the other part of it, Adelaide said, and from her pocket withdrew 2 small glass bottles and a small knife.
What the devil is that for?
Warren demanded.
Blood,
Eldrin said.
Adelaide's blood, as it is apparently the only thing Egrida must truly fear.
Chapter 9. Egrida moved through the corridors as nothing more than a flitting shadow. For now, it was taking far too much of her energy to manifest in any physical way, and she would only do so when absolutely necessary. They were planning something. The weak and pathetic mortals who were in her domain. But in her current form, other than an occasional shiver or a maid glancing nervously over her shoulder as if feeling watched, no one was the wiser of her presence. It gave her an opportunity to gauge her enemy's progress, listening, seeking. No one was there. They were all off plotting together. They had discovered one of her few weaknesses, salt. They had exploited it again and again by going down to the beach and conducting their clandestine meetings for their doomed bid to take her power. It angered her, but there was naught she could do about it until Francis's child could safely be born into the world. When she inhabited its body, she would not have to fear anything. Salt would not stop her, nor would the blood of her descendants. She would be made new with that body, but more powerful than any other living creature on earth. Thinking of Frances in her tiny cell, her once immaculate appearance, now slovenly and disheveled, Egrida felt a deep sense of satisfaction, of vindication. She had taught that ungrateful witch a lesson. Frances had tried to bribe the guard at her asylum to bring her an herbal concoction to force the babe from her womb. Instead, he'd taken her money and left her with nothing but rage as they restrained her to the bed for fear she would harm herself and the child she carried. Egrida had nudged him in that direction, guiding his actions with little more than a whisper in his ears. Most of the living were little better than sheep, easily led and easily controlled. Until the upstart countess had arrived, even the Llewellyns had been under her thumb, believing precisely what she wanted. For centuries, thanks to the sympathetic bride of one of their ancestors in the 17th century, the story had been twisted to paint her accursed husband as the villain of the piece. She'd had an inkling then that her power would one day be challenged, and had hoped to camouflage her presence well enough to prevent a direct challenge to her power. Adelaide. She was the one who had discovered her true identity, who had threatened to bring all her plans crashing down. Who did she think she was to make such bold proclamations that she would bring an end to her reign? Frances was no different. Always the greedy little witch had thought herself special, when in truth her powers were minimal. Glamours and the ability to sway people to her aid was simple enough tricks for anyone with a modicum of talent. Frances wasn't worthy of the power Agrita had gifted her thus far, and certainly was not worthy of what she was asking for. But Agrita needed a new form, one that would not share blood with Adelaide Llewellyn. Otherwise, all would be lost. In all the years she'd existed there, trapped between the world of the living and the dead, bound by her own hubris in crafting a spell so complex, she'd never encountered anyone who had the power to end her existence before. If Adelaide existed, others did as well, and that meant obtaining a new body and beginning again, one that would not be left vulnerable by her own youthful ineptitude in casting the spells and curses that had resulted in her current precarious state.
I think she's a witch.
That statement made Agrita pause. Two maids were in one of the bedchambers, tidying up and stripping beds.
Madame Leola? Hardly a witch. I think she's nothing but a phony, just like the fortune tellers at the fair. She might have fancier clothes and put on airs, but a fake is a fake in my book. No, not her. Lady Monteith. I think she's a witch. Hush! That's the sort of talk will get us both sacked. How do you explain all the strange goings-on here since she arrived then?
The first one shot back, giving her companion a smug look.
I don't need to explain them. That's not my job, is it? My job is to make the beds, clean the floors, and do whatever the housekeeper or Mr. Tromley tells me to do, and so is yours. If we're caught gossiping about them that are above us,
It ain't gossip, and I weren't saying it like it was a bad thing. Really, I like Lady Monteith a lot better than I ever liked that Mrs. Llewellyn. She were a cold one right through to her bones.
The second maid sighed.
If you want to know who's a witch in this house, my money would have been on her. I saw her do some things, and heard her say some things that just weren't right. And I still don't know what she ever did to poor Charlie. He weren't that sort, you know. Not to be untrue, and certainly not to fall into bed with whatever fancy trollop crooked a finger at him.
You were sweet on him,
the first maid accused.
I knew it. Did you ever tell him?
I did. And fat lot of good it did me. From the moment he stepped foot in this house, he was after me. We flirted, and he even asked me to walk out with him on a half-day. Then she sunk her claws into him, and he were never the same after.
The conversation continued as the maids drifted from the room, carrying their bundles of soiled linens. As they passed Agrita's shadowy form in the hallway, the younger of the two shivered and glanced about her nervously.
Ignore it,
the second one advised her.
Anytime you feel something like that in this house, you do best to pretend it didn't happen.
And if you don't?
Tromley will not put up with servants talking about ghosties and spooks below stairs, and there's some here you can't trust to share such stories with. They'll run to him quick as fire and tattle on you. The pay is good here, and there's enough servants that the workload doesn't have you crying as you get into bed each night. I want to keep my job. If you're smart,
you'll do the same."
The first maid nodded, but as they made their way down the corridor to one of the many concealed passages, she glanced back over her shoulder, amused at the girl and enjoying herself. Agrida made the curtain at the end of the corridor flutter as if someone had moved past them. The girl quickened her steps as her head swiveled forward. She would not look back again, Agrida thought, no matter what.
With the greenery all wired with explosives and repackaged in the numerous crates, Eldrin and Warren left first. Lord Mortimer assisted them in carting the various crates back to the wagon. Adelaide watched them as they made their last pass with Leola at her side. It wasn't foreboding so much that it overtook her, but Adelaide found herself suddenly overwhelmed with fear. Had they made the right choice? Was it possible that they could simply have run? Could they have made their way to America and somehow built a life there without the tormenting presence of Agrida's curse and insidious influence? They would never know, Adelaide thought. She'd been so insistent that this was the way, the only way, that no other alternatives had really been entertained. Will this work?
"It is a sound plan,"
Leola replied. Adelaide spared her a sidelong glance. "I wasn't asking about the soundness of the plan. I am not asking what you think, Leola, but what you see." Leola smiled. "I know what you ask, and I cannot give you an answer." "Can't or won't?" Adelaide demanded. "I truly cannot. My own fate is now very much tied to yours, and whatever happens here in the next 2 days. With that, I cannot look objectively at the future. I cannot look beyond what I want to see or what I fear will happen to know the truth. Is there some way of divining an answer that is not entirely dependent upon your visions? There are cards. I could read them for you if you like, but they are open to interpretation and may well be skewed by our own fears and desires." "Do it," Adelaide asked. "Please?" Leola moved toward the small bag she had carried with them. From inside, she withdrew a cloth-wrapped bundle. "I carry them with me everywhere, not because I use them, but because they are a talisman, I suppose. They were my mother's, you see, and they remind me of the life I might have been living otherwise." "Was it so very terrible, then?" Adelaide asked. "Your childhood?" Madame Leola smiled. "It was not terrible. It was, however, eccentric. I learned to read cards before I learned to read books," she explained. "We were often poor. We often struggled, and there were many nights, now that I recall them as an adult, that I ate and my mother did not. In the end, for all her sacrifice, she managed to send me off to read fortunes and advise a wealthy exiled royal from some tiny little principality destroyed by revolution. My patron was generous and taught me things my mother could not. How to dress, how to navigate social events, protocol and etiquette. I owe her a great deal." "And your mother? What became of her?" Leola's smile, sad as it was, faded. "She died before I could come back for her. I had already leased a little cottage by the sea where we could live together and where I could advise those who could pay my rather exorbitant fees. Like many things in her life, it was too little, too late. But we're not here to talk about my past. You want to know about your future." Adelaide settled herself on the blanket once more, directly across from Madame Leola. "What do you need me to do?" Leola placed the deck of cards in front of her, cut them into 3 stacks, and set them aside. That is all. Adelaide did as she asked. Leola tapped the first stack of cards. "Turn the first one over." Adelaide did so. There was an image of a beautiful woman in elegant robes, wearing a moon headdress. "What does it mean?" "It represents you, Adelaide," Leola said. "She's the Empress, and she represents fertility." Adelaide stared at the card and felt such a deep sense of longing inside her that it took her breath. She knew that what had transpired between herself and Eldrin the night before had changed things, that the possibility existed, even in that moment, that she could be carrying his child. While she wanted that more than anything, she also feared it. Until they were free of Agrita, it was too much to risk. "Now, this deck," Leola said, tapping one perfectly manicured finger against the cards. Adelaide turned the card over as indicated. It was a building in flames. The imagery was horrific, with people jumping from the engulfed structure. And this one? The tower represents where we are now: upheaval, turmoil, danger, disaster. Adelaide's heart sank. "Oh, God, we're going to fail." "Not necessarily. The card is reversed, so the meaning is not the opposite. Exactly, but it is lessened. I think what this means is that it is still undecided, but the next card will tell us that for certain. Turn it over, my dear, and let us see what fate holds in store for us." Again, Adelaide turned the card over. She had no notion of what she was looking at. And this one? The Wheel of Fortune. It means that your fate, whatever it may be, is undecided at this time. It is hanging in the balance. But our path, the one we are on right now, is inevitable, Leola said. I told you it was a good plan. It's also the only plan.
Chapter 10. Eldrin had footmen carry the crates inside, deciding that it would appear less suspicious that way. As the last of them was carried inside and placed in the morning room, Adelaide and Madame Leola came strolling up the path from the beach. They were laughing, their heads close together in the way that female friends often did. It was easy, intimate, and appeared to be without any sort of the posturing or competitiveness so often found in male friendships. And yet, while she laughed and talked with her friend, it was clear to him in that moment that there was something false in her manner. The gaiety she displayed was forced. There was tension in her shoulders. Her smile was a tad too bright, her laugh just a bit too loud. Eldrin descended the steps from the front door and walked toward them. As he reached them, he held out his hand to her, and Adelaide immediately disengaged from Madame Leola and approached him, placing her hand in his. "Is everything all right?" he asked.
It's fine. I'm simply second-guessing myself. But it isn't the soundness of our plan that is the issue, but my own fears. We proceed.
"You're certain? It isn't too late," he offered.
It is, actually. We're in it now, and we cannot back down. I had a moment of doubt, but the plan is sound, and we should keep to it.
Adelaide insisted. With a smile that was equal parts brave and heartbreaking, she said,
Now, let us go and get Dillis and a couple of other maids and prepare the house for our holiday celebration.
Eldrin kissed her. It wasn't passionate, but it was achingly tender. He loved her more than anything in this world, certainly more than a pile of stones that had brought nothing but pain and misery to every person who'd had the misfortune to inhabit them. "Let's get inside," he said, drawing back from her. "We've a great deal of work to do, and not very much time to do it in." Entering the house side by side, Warren was waiting for them. The servants were all bustling about. Tromley had just informed everyone that they would have Christmas Eve off to attend services in the village, and that a party would be held for them at the assembly rooms in the village afterward. The food and drink that had been intended to supply the wedding feast for Lord Mortimer and Madame Leola would instead be made available to them, as the wedding had been postponed. It was, perhaps, the most excitement of a pleasant sort that any of them had enjoyed in a very long time. It caught him by surprise, that sense that he had somehow not taken care of the people who care for him as he should have done. Paying them a generous wage was not enough. They needed joy. They needed moments of happiness and things to look forward to. Such optimism had not been found within Cuscodlis in a very long time. What would become of all of them when the house was destroyed? They would go to London with them, if they chose, he decided, and those who did not would be given generous severance and assistance in finding new positions. Warren would need a household as well, one that had not been tainted by Francis's presence, and that was not manned by servants loyal to their former mistress.
"It will be fine,"
Adelaide said, squeezing his hand.
"They will be fine. Let us go inside and get things underway."
I was just thinking that I have not provided for our servants as I should have. That it takes more than a generous wage to make them happy. I've failed them in that regard.
Then tomorrow will be a step in the right direction. And afterward, we will take more steps in the right direction.
He nodded at that, grateful that she seemed to understand without his even having to say it aloud, that he felt an obligation to them. Entering the house, Eldrin did something he had not done for a very long time. He said a silent prayer for their success, for the end of the evil at Cuscodlis, and for the beginning of a new life, free and without the taint of evil.
Entering the morning room, Adelaide found Dilys waiting for her, along with a couple of maids she did not know quite so well. "Hello," Adelaide said softly. "I'm so glad you've come to help. I'm very excited to see the house be decked for Christmas. Have you ever decorated in such a manner before?" One of the other maids spoke up. "Not since I've been here, your ladyship, but my mother worked here before me, and she said it used to be lovely during the holidays." Adelaide smiled. She was telling them a lie, but it was necessary. "Well, we shall endeavor to match the gaiety and beauty of times past." "How would you like the decorations, milady?" Dilys asked. Adelaide crossed to one of the crates and carefully lifted up the garland. "Place these on the mantels in every room, and festoon the doorways as well. There are wreaths to place on the windows and doors." Dilys stepped forward and accepted the garland from her. As she did, the greenery parted and revealed one of the sticks of dynamite. The maid looked up, her eyes wide with shock. "Milady?" "It's fine, Dilys. Tomorrow will be a grand day for everyone, servants and family alike," Adelaide said. "It will be a joyous occasion." The maid stared at her for a long moment, and Adelaide prayed that she would understand the unspoken meaning in her gaze. Finally, Dilys nodded. "Indeed, milady. We appreciate the sacrifice you are all making in giving us the day off to attend services and hosting a feast for us in town. We will make certain the house is just as you require it before we leave." Adelaide sighed in relief. "Thank you, Dilys. That means the world to me. Your loyal service to us will always be rewarded." It was a layered conversation, full of subtext and unspoken understanding. The maid nodded, and Adelaide left them to check in with the kitchen staff and make sure all of the food preparations for the following day had been seen to. It was the strangest thing to walk around in a house that would be lined with explosives in a matter of hours, and to act as if everything was normal, as if it were any other day. Her mind kept drifting back to the card reading that Leola had done for her. The Tower and the Wheel of Fortune were not unexpected, but it was the first card, the Empress, which plucked incessantly at her thoughts. She wanted all that it represented. craved it as nothing else in her life. To live and love with Eldrin at her side, to give him children, to grow old with him. Those were things she had never thought to have in her life. Love had been something she had assumed would happen for others, never for herself. And yet, she did love him. She loved him so intently, it robbed her of breath. The risk will be worth it, she told herself. It will be worth it.
Chapter 11. Eldrin climbed the stairs, eager to seek the sanctuary of their chambers. It had been a long day. The idea of sleeping in a house lined with explosives was disquieting, to say the least, but it was imperative they act as if nothing were different. They had to keep up appearances, at least till the morning. As he traversed the corridor, he felt it again, that same sense of not being alone. There was no one in the corridor, no one that he could see or hear or smell, and yet he knew he was not alone. His steps slowed until he paused there, the gas lamps flickering around him. Long shadows crept along the wall, twisting and writhing in a way that, while not unnatural, was nonetheless unnerving. "What do you want?" he called out. The response was a faint whisper, a movement of air along his skin. It raised chills in its wake. Still, she did not show herself. Those air currents buffeted him, coming from a dozen directions, moving over him like water. It was a trick, something to rattle his nerves and make him careless.
What are you planning for me, dear Eldrin?
The whispered question was so loud, it sounded almost as if it was inside his own skull. Fear came on the heels of that thought. Was she inside his head? Could she know what it was that they were about? "Leave me be, witch."
Tut, 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 tut. That's no way to speak to me. I'm your family. After all. Generations removed, of course.
"You are no family of mine. Family does not cause pain, agony, and destruction with such ferocity." She laughed then.
But they do. My father raped me, and my mother despised me for it, because she felt I had taken his affection from her.
"And is that why you murdered the entire village?"
No. I murdered them for the power it would bring to appease the ancient gods we worshipped, before the Pope would deny us the power of magic and claim it only for his God.
"And the torment and misery you've caused since?"
I have nobody to nourish and give me strength. I must nourish and replenish my soul by siphoning the energy of others. But your mystic told you that. Did she not? What else did she tell you, Eldrin?
"Leave me be," he shouted. He needed her out of his head. It was as if he could feel her probing his thoughts, digging inside his mind for the answers she sought. Further down the corridor, a door opened, and Madame Leola emerged. She was wearing a crimson dressing gown, her colour of choice.
"Lord Monteith, are you well?"
she queried. "I don't suppose you have anything that can stop spirits from talking to you, do you?" he asked. She remained silent, but walked toward him. When she was only an arm's length away, she reached up and released the clasp of a chain she wore about her neck. It was a large piece of agate, set in silver.
"This should help,"
Wear it under your clothes, next to your skin.
He looked at the silver filigree setting.
It's a bit delicate for my taste.
Only in form, my lord, not function. She speaks to you because she wants to invade your thoughts. You must not let her. Agate has many magical properties, and the warding off of negative spirits is one of them.
Is she a spirit?
Madame Leola cocked her head to one side.
In some senses, yes. In others, she is more. So much more.
Eldrin closed his hand around the piece of jewelry. It felt cool, but more so. The strange frissions that had been travelling over his skin, the air currents and the whispers and even the chills that had resulted from them, began to abate. Was it simply the power of suggestion? Does it matter? He asked himself that question and found that it did not. He would take any piece he could get.
Thank you, Madame Leola.
Just Leola. Madam is a title I use professionally, but it isn't necessary between friends,
she said with a smile. He was struck then by the fact that she was lovely, but also that she was far older than he had initially believed her to be.
I wish you and Lord Mortimer, John, every happiness, Leola. And yes, we are friends. Given what we have endured together here, we could be nothing less.
Good night, Eldrin,
she said softly, and turned on her heel, retreating to her chamber. As her door opened once more, he heard a male voice emerging from inside. Their wedding night might have been postponed, but it seemed clear to him that they were not denying themselves the joy of the marriage bed. He didn't feel any censure, only a bit of envy, and the desire to seek out Adelaide and the pleasures of their own bed. Continuing down the hall to their chambers, undisturbed, Eldrin entered the chambers and found to his delight that Adelaide was neck-deep in a tub of water. Her hair was pinned atop her head in a loose chignon, with soft tendrils curling against her neck and shoulders. The water barely covered her nipples, the upper swells of her breasts visible above the waterline. Tillis looked up from her duties and immediately rose and bobbed a curtsy. She fled instantly. As the door closed behind the maid, Adelaide smiled at him in the most beguiling manner.
You always sent her running for the door. What if I needed her?
There is nothing you could require of her tonight that I would not do for you, he replied.
Can you dress my hair?
She asked.
I can run my fingers through it. I can feel it wrapped around me as I kiss every inch of you. Isn't that a more satisfying option for us both?
She didn't reply instantly. Her lips parted and her breath hitched. Finally, she offered.
It certainly has its own appeal.
Eldrin reached up and untied his neckcloth. Slowly he freed the buttons of his waistcoat and then tugged his shirt free from his trousers. Doffing both garments, he was stripped to the waist and savouring the sensation of her eyes upon him. He unbuttoned his trousers and removed them, stripping each piece of clothing from his body until he was completely nude. Recalling the necklace from Madame Leola, he retrieved it from his pocket and then clasped it about his neck.
It isn't really your normal style,
Adelaide said, indicating the piece of jewelry.
I'm a bit offended that I'm walking toward you completely naked, and you're looking at what I have about my neck, he said with a wicked grin.
She shrugged.
I've seen everything else already. The necklace is new.
He laughed then.
Bored with me already? I feel that's rather unjust, as I could look at your body every day head to toe and discover new ways to appreciate how beautiful it is.
As he spoke, he continued walking forward, until he reached the edge of the tub. It was not overly large, but there was space enough for the both of them in it. Lifting one foot, he placed it in the water, finding it still steaming hot.
"You're going to make a mess,"
she said. "I certainly hope so," he replied. "Make room for me." Adelaide shifted her legs then, providing room for him to sink into the water with her. Lifting her feet, he placed them on his lap and began to gently caress the muscles of her lower legs, kneading her soft, silken flesh. He watched her head roll back against the edge of the tub, and a contented sigh escaped her.
"That feels incredible,"
she said.
"But whatever you have planned, it cannot be done in the tub, not without sending water everywhere."
"Under the circumstances, I think any potential damage to the floor is an acceptable risk," he replied. Her eyes popped open, and she glanced toward the window and the intricately crafted wreath that was hanging there. Another one festooned the door. The garland would not be placed until the morning, as it was too dangerous to have it so close to the fire.
"I see your point,"
she agreed. Eldrin lifted her foot again, pressing a kiss to the delicate bones at the inside of her ankle. "Come here," he urged. She withdrew her foot from his grasp and rose to her knees, parting them so that when she sank down, they flanked his thighs. The water in the tub sloshed, arcing up to the side but not spilling over. Adelaide glanced at it, and then back at him.
"How am I supposed to explain this to Dilys?"
"Do not," he said. "Your maid can't even look at me without blushing as it stands. If we make a mess, we'll clean it up ourselves."
"If."
"When," he conceded. With that, he shifted slightly, lifting his own hips and joining their bodies. That she was aroused, eager for him already, was a beautiful thing to him, perhaps the most joyous that he could ever recall.
"Have you given up, then?"
she asked. "Given up on what?" he asked, flexing slightly. It was a gentle movement, a soft and slow rocking movement that let the pleasure build slowly.
"On the idea that we should avoid the possibility of children at all costs."
He sighed. "You asked me to have faith. You cannot have faith without hope, and perhaps this is ours." She leaned against him, moving in unison with him, rocking in a slow, easy rhythm so that the water sloshed back and forth, but never spilled. She looked at it and smiled.
"Maybe we won't make a mess of things, after all." Leola sat before her dressing table and brushed her dark hair. There were a few strands of silver weaving their way through the mass. More and more all the time, it seemed. Reaching up with one hand, she toyed with a cluster of them at her temple. She could have it dyed. There were ways, of course, but it rarely looked natural and always did damage.
"They are beautiful,"
John said, coming to stand behind her and covering her hand with his.
"Why do they worry you so?"
"I am not a young woman, not anymore. I should be angry at you, you know. You wasted my best years," she said, but the statement was softened with a smile and lacked any heat.
"Surely not your best,"
he said.
"You are a woman in your prime."
She laughed scoffingly. "The prime of what? No, not my prime. Not quite my middle years, I hope. But certainly there are more lines, more silver hairs, and flesh not nearly as firm and supple as it once was."
"You are as gorgeous now as the day I met you."
and while I did waste a considerable amount of time, not so much that we are destined for a platonic dotage together,"
he protested.
"And I might point out that you've wasted some time as well. Were it not for your unilateral decision to postpone our nuptials, we'd be married tomorrow, and embarking on that life together a bit earlier."
Leola sighed sadly. "It wasn't because I wanted to. Adelaide and Eldrin will need us tomorrow. I cannot say how or why I know that, only that I do. Our presence here is vital to their very survival, I think. Are you terribly disappointed?"
"I am,"
he agreed with a wicked grin.
"Heartbroken and despondent. There is only one cure for this terrible pain."
His overly dramatic tone prompted more laughter from her. It was a strange thing to suddenly discover the playful side of his personality. For years, he'd been so somber and serious. For a split second, jealousy reared inside her. Had he been this way with his first wife? Had he joked and played and teased in such a manner? Leola shoved the thought aside. It was unworthy of being entertained. He had loved his first wife, as he should, and now he would love her, as he should. Comparing the two would only lead to misery and discontent. "And what is it that would free you of such agony?" she asked. He leaned forward and kissed her neck, his lips trailing hotly over her body until she shivered. Then he reached for the ties of her dressing gown.
"It's a very long story,"
he said.
"We should make ourselves comfortable on the bed to discuss it further."
Her lips quirked upward in reluctant amusement. "You are not nearly as sly as you imagine."
"But am I persuasive? I don't care if I fool you, Leola, so long as we both get what we want in the end,"
he confessed. They would. She would make certain of it. Shrugging off the crimson silk of her dressing gown, she rose to her feet. With one gentle tug, the ties that held her night rail together at the shoulders slipped free, and the silk slithered over her skin until it puddled on the floor. Naked entirely, she faced him. The bed might be more comfortable, but there's better light here, if you wish to enjoy the view.
"You are a wicked woman, Leola."
I should certainly hope so. Chapter 12. It was early morning. Breakfast had been laid on the sideboard in chafing dishes. The staff were all bustling about in their finest clothes, loading onto the backs of wagons and carts that had been drafted into service to ferry them along. Some were singing, others were laughing. Adelaide watched them and felt a stirring in her breast. They were happy, but for many of them, Cuscatlis was their home. Their parents had served there, and it was their inheritance, of a sort, to work in the same house for the same family. Her maid entered then, somber and quiet. "Milady, are you certain you don't have need of me this morning?" Dilys asked, her face etched with concern. "I'm certain, Dilys. I will see you this afternoon, after your party. There is nothing that cannot wait until then. You should enjoy the service, enjoy the food, and I do believe there will be dancing. And I know there's a footman who you've been flirting with," Adelaide teased. The maid gaped at her, her mouth opening and closing in a comically fish-like manner. I wouldn't. That's not at all. Milady." "Then it should be," Adelaide responded reproachfully. "What is a party for, if not for dancing and flirting? Enjoy it, Dilys. You've earned it, after all. This is a reward for all the hard work you've done, for the hard work you have all done." Dilys smiled. "Yes, milady.
I shall endeavour to relax and enjoy myself and not think of things that are done or undone here at Cwsgodlys.
Adelaide hooked her arm through the maid's and walked her to the door. As it should be. Go, be merry and bright. As the last of the servants exited the house, the silence of it, the utter quiet and stillness of it, was disturbing to her. It was preternatural. Even as that word hummed in her brain, she felt that slight shift in the air, that strange sensation of things moving about her. Then the shadows on the wall leapt and twisted in a way that could have nothing to do with a change in the light. The hair raised at the nape of her neck, and the overwhelming sensation of not being alone swept through her.
Parlor tricks and nonsense,
Adelaide called out with false bravado.
I'm not afraid. I won't be cowed by you, witch.
The door opened, and Leola joined her then. You feel it, don't you? The question was uttered quietly, not precisely a whisper, but definitely circumspect. I do, Adelaide replied.
It's easy enough to ignore when there is a house full of servants and other people about.
But when it's just us, she's choosing not to hide right now. She wants us to know she's here, to feel her, and to fear her power. Leola nodded. It's more than that. It's like she's circling us, like two fighters getting ready to square off. There's a sense of, anticipation, I suppose.
Adelaide considered that carefully.
It was true enough. She wanted an end. Whatever the outcome, she needed it to no longer be looming over her. Then let's get on with it, shall we? Leola took a deep breath. Do you have the vials? Adelaide reached into the pocket of her skirt and retrieved the 2 small vials of her blood. They were small, silver-filigreed vinaigrettes used for smelling salts. The silence in the house was suddenly gone. Wind whipped along the corridors, whipping the curtains to and fro, as doors slammed along the upper floors. Eldrin and Lord Mortimer appeared then, coming from deeper within the house. From the implacable expression on Eldrin's face, Adelaide could tell he was unimpressed with Agrida's theatrics.
To the cellars, then,
he suggested as he neared them. Yes, Adelaide agreed. It's time. Together, the 4 of them slowly made their way toward the cellar entrance. The stairs were still littered with rubble and debris from the explosion that had very nearly killed Eldrin only weeks earlier. Thinking of it thusly, realizing that it had been such a short time when so much had happened in the interim, gave her a start. Had it really taken her so little time to fall so deeply in love with her husband, and to find her courage? 3 months earlier, she had been terrified of her own shadow, hiding from her father's disapproval, her stepmother's bitterness and censure, and the judgment of all of society. Now, she was preparing to face off against an ancient entity armed with nothing but a vial of her own blood. It sounded positively insane, as if it were she, rather than Francis, who should be locked away in an asylum. Lord Mortimer had obtained lanterns for them, and Eldrin took one in his left hand and reached for her with his right. Placing her hand in his, Adelaide allowed him to lead her down into the dark dank below. As she reached the bottom step, she didn't hesitate. She turned to her left, and everyone followed suit.
How do you know?
Eldrin whispered. Adelaide smiled softly. I do not know. I simply feel and allow it to guide me. That is the thing Leola has taught me above all else, to trust my feelings.
Then lead on, my wife. Let us bring this to an end.
Placing one foot in front of the other, Adelaide traversed the narrow corridor. It was dark, damp, with a foul odor of decay, There were sounds in the darkness, the scurrying of rats, the tapping sound of insects' legs on the stones. Beyond that, there was the whispering, the rattling of voices that should have long since been silent. The dead were with them, closing in on them with every step they took. Behind her, she heard Madame Leola murmuring softly. It was a language she recognized, though she herself could not speak it. Romani. Only on rare occasions had she heard it from her mother. As a child, when she'd been very ill, her mother had sat beside her bed all night, murmuring those same words. It was strangely comforting, Adelaide thought. In the midst of all the other smells, there was another one. Francis's cloying perfume. "Hold the lantern high, Eldrin," she said. He did so, and revealed a small space, an alcove carved into the stones, that was a feminine bastion in the ugly darkness. Several cushions were on the floor, and a rug. There was also a small altar, and shelves and tables bearing bottles and jars of heaven only knew what. "So this is where Frances conducted her spells," Leola murmured. "I had wondered how she kept her secret."
"There must be another way in,"
Eldrin said.
"She never passed by me when I was down here."
"There are many ways in and out," Adelaide said. "But yes, there is one tunnel that leads to the outside, and that is what she used. Her walks and morning rides were nothing but a fabrication to cover her true actions." Even Leola frowned at the very specific knowledge that Adelaide seemed to be acquiring in that space. "How can you know?" the mystic demanded. "This is more than a feeling or instincts." Adelaide frowned. "It seems as if the closer I am to the seat of Agrita's power, the more my own is enhanced. That is a good thing. It gives us an advantage, I hope. But it's terrifying, nonetheless." "No, it's fate," Leola said. "It's why she fears you. Power is not created. It exists. If you have more, she has less. It is balance."
"And when she's destroyed,"
Eldrin asked,
"where does this power go then?"
Leola said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. Adelaide didn't want to be burdened with such power. She didn't want it within herself, nor did she want the veil it might draw to her throughout her life. But in the end, it wasn't a choice. What she wanted was insignificant in the grander scheme of things. For the sake of those she loved, she had to put aside her own feelings. "It doesn't matter," Adelaide said. "It has to happen, regardless." Moving deeper along the corridor, the other three followed close on her heels. Shadows flitted, moving in a frenzied way. They weren't trying to stop them, but that didn't make them allies. In the distance, she could see the dark, round shape of the well, and before it was a great, dark mass, hissing, spitting like a cat. It raised its hand-like talons and was ready to attack. Adelaide reached into her pocket, closing her hand over the small silver-encased bottle. Her blood, Agrita's blood. It was the key to all of it, the key to ending the misery of over 600 years. "Stand down," she called out. The thing screeched at them, opening its mouth as if it were a great and gaping maw. There were no teeth, but black muck, just as she'd seen in her room that night, oozed from its lips. With the vial in her hand, Adelaide flicked the small clasp that would open it. She felt the cold, thick liquid on the tip of her finger and prayed it would be enough. No sooner had that thought entered her mind than the thing lunged forward. It loped like a hulking beast as it ran at her, seeming to pull the very shadows from the floor beneath it, becoming darker, larger, more menacing as it moved. Eldrin stepped forward, putting her behind him. It knocked him out of the way, sending him crashing into the wall. The thing then grasped her, locking its elongated fingers about her throat and squeezing. Adelaide lifted her hand, smeared the blood from her finger onto what should have been flesh, but felt like leather over rotting wood. The creature, for that was what it was, screeched in anger and pain. It was not a Greta, merely a form she borrowed, a thing she'd crafted from the broken bodies of those she'd destroyed. It retreated, merging back into the shadows from whence it came, melting into them as it disintegrated once more. She's in the well, and we need to get her out.
Chapter 13. Eldrin held the lantern aloft, peering into the dark cylinder of the well. He'd have rather walked across broken glass than climbed down into that small, dark space. But of all the people present, he was the one most capable of getting in and out of it. He heard a rustling sound and glanced over his shoulder. Adelaide and Leola were both removing their petticoats. "What the devil are you doing?"
The well isn't so deep you'd require a rope to get in and out, but you will need something with which to move her remains,
Adelaide said simply.
And it's best if you don't touch them with your bare hands.
I have no particular desire to do so, at any rate. Leola rolled her eyes as she held out her petticoat to him.
If any of her flesh, what remains of it, were to transfer to you, or get upon your clothes that you wear away from here, it would render this all for naught. We must seal her body into the earth on the moor. Whatever earthly remains still persist. Nothing can be allowed to remain.
Taking the undergarment, Eldrin lowered himself over the side. The well, if it was such, had been designed almost with steps. Every few feet was a stone that jutted out and provided purchase for him. It made him think that the space had served a different purpose altogether. Was it older than he'd suspected? Roman in origin, perhaps? Could it have been a bath at some point? Only 8 feet deep or so, and with steps. It seemed likely. It had long since dried, however. Kneeling on the spongy earth at the bottom, he used the petticoat from Madame Leola to scrape the dirt back. He found her skull first, a tangle of matted hair and a sunken, leathery face with empty eye sockets. It seemed to stare up at him mockingly as he shivered at the horrifying sight. "Toss down the other petticoats," he called. The white fabric flitted down like a ghost. Carefully, Eldrin scooped out handfuls of dirt, using the now stained fabric. Each one he placed carefully on Adelaide's donated petticoat. When the body was freed, he carefully lifted it, moving it one slow, agonizing inch at a time, until he could roll it and the dirt up inside it. He wrapped it double in what remained of Leola's. "Get the rug from Francis's little haven of horrors," he instructed. Down in that pit, along with the withered corpse of the body that had once housed Egrida's wicked soul, Eldrin felt strangely exposed and vulnerable. There was a strong sensation of not being alone down there. Then he felt it, a soft breeze against his cheek. It ruffled his hair, almost like a caress.
"Don't make me hurt you.
That same insidious whisper from the previous night, the one that had taunted him in the corridor, was once more reverberating inside his mind. "Leave me be," he demanded.
Eldrin, are you all right?
Adelaide called out from above. "Fine," he answered sharply. Reaching up, he tugged at his neckcloth until the knot slid free. Yanking it loose, He reached inside his shirt and placed his hand over the agate pendant. Touching it offered him a sense of peace, even in that dark place. Lifting it from inside his shirt, he held it up. "You cannot hurt me." The sound of cruel laughter buffeted him.
You foolish man. I can hurt you without ever touching you. There is someone now whom you care for more than yourself.
Eldrin felt a moment of panic.
"Hurry up with that blasted rug. And Leola, if you have another one of those magical necklaces, put it on Adelaide right now."
Apparently, Lord Mortimer had already fetched it, because it was being lowered over the side as he asked for it. It was the final layer around the remnants of a once living soul. Lifting it up, he passed it carefully to Lord Mortimer, and then climbed out after. As the body was lifted free of the pit, wind howled down the corridors, and those shadows that had flitted to and fro before now coalesced into something dark and dense. Each step they took, they were battling the wind, but not only that. The earth itself seemed to be sucking at their feet, hindering their progress.
"Adelaide, find the way out of here,"
he called out. There was no response. Eldrin spared a glance at her and found her facing into the wind that seemed to have come from nowhere. Her arms were wide, her head was thrown back, and her eyes were wide open and completely white, just as Madame Leola's had been that night during the séance.
"What's happening?"
Eldrin demanded of the mystic. Madame Leola shook her head and called out, her voice barely audible above the howling of the unnatural wind.
"I do not know, but I fear it does not bode well."
On the moor, Warren dug. It wasn't the most heroic of tasks, but it was the one that needed to be done. Eldrin had explained to him that they would have to find Degrida's bones and remove them to the moor where she could be bound forever, and that meant digging a grave. He wasn't fit for the other tasks. The idea of searching subterranean chambers for ancient bones made him cringe. Of course, the idea of being on the moor made him cringe as well. But at least there he was outside. He could feel the air on his skin and could draw it deeply into his lungs. Of course, there were downsides to his chosen chore. Pausing to wipe sweat from his brow, he ignored the chill that snaked along his spine. He wasn't alone. The wind rattled through the trees and whistled over rocks. That was what he heard, he said to himself. Only the wind. To entertain the notion that it was anything else in that moment was to run screaming from that accursed place and never return. The longer he remained, the more clear the words became. What had been simply indistinct whispers in the beginning now sounded like actual words. There was tone and inflection. There was a rhythm to it. It wasn't one voice, but dozens, if not hundreds, and all of them speaking at once. Part of him wanted to drop his spade and simply walk away. He could reach the lane and head for the village, and there would be a drink poured for him at the small tavern there without a single question asked about his disheveled state. While no one spoke of it directly, everyone knew he was a drunk, and drunks were frequently disheveled, after all. As much to drown out the voices and whispers, as much to ignore the chill wind that coasted over his skin, Warren kept digging. He dug and dug until the hole began to resemble its intended purpose, a grave. With considerable effort,
He managed to hoist himself out, and he looked around at the gathering mist. It held ominous portent of all that was to come.
Chapter 14. The assault on her senses was not something Adelaide had been prepared for. Egrita was there, shrieking at her. But she was not alone. All of the dead had gathered. All of the ones whose lives she'd taken, whose will she had usurped, whose very souls had been her source of energy for centuries. They were angry, not at the one who had destroyed them, but at anyone living. It seemed that she could hear Eldrin's voice from a great distance, and Madame Leola's further away still. But it was another voice in the cacophony of shouts and grunts and ugly, vicious words that penetrated the haze of her mind. "My sweet, darling girl, find the safe place I showed you." Her mother. Somehow, not from within the dank walls of that cellar, but from somewhere within herself, her mother spoke to her. An image flashed in her mind of that room draped in silks and littered with cushions covered in exotic fabrics. Adelaide forced her eyes closed, concentrated on the sound of her own breathing, of her own heart pounding in her chest, and the blood rushing in her ears. That image reappeared, more solid and detailed than before. She struggled to hold it, focusing on only one point. She found the small altar that her mother had created within that room. Staring at it, the room seemed to build itself around her. The details grew denser, more solid. The fabric was no longer a two-dimensional image, but so real, it was as if she could touch her hand to the silk and feel the raw, nubby texture of it. And there was her mother, young, beautiful, long before her body had been ravaged with a sickness no one could halt. Her dark hair was swept back in the elaborate cascade of curls she'd always preferred, and she wore one of the brightly colored silk dresses that had been her hallmark. "What do I do? I cannot see anything in the real world. I cannot see to lead them from here," Adelaide cried. Her mother approached her. "Egrita would rob you of all your senses, the 5 possessed by everyone, and those that are unique to people such as you and your Madame Leola." "Why didn't I know before I came here?" "I couldn't let you. Your father forbade me teach you how to control your gifts. He thought it all nonsense anyway. In order to protect you, I bound your gifts, and I placed protection spells all around the house in New York. But they only protected you from the dead. I had no way to protect you from the living." "You bound my gifts." "I had to. If you had been allowed to walk unprotected into the world with what you could do, it would have destroyed you. But when your father took you to Paris, when he took you far away from the spells and charms I had created to keep you safe, then it all began to unravel." "What brought me here to Cuscatlis, Mother?" Adelaide demanded. "Fate brought you here, my sweet girl. Try as I might to stop it, there was naught I could do." "How do I get us out of here?" "You put one foot in front of the other and walk. Trust fate to lead you where you must go, just as it has brought you here. And I will stay with you till the end this time. I will keep the others from you." That promise, so like the words her mother had whispered to her as a child, that she would always keep Adelaide from harm, tugged at her heart. It also spurred her to action. With difficulty, Adelaide pulled one foot free from the muck that had replaced the hard-packed soil of the cellar floors. It was Agrita, manipulating the very rocks and soil of Coscotlis to try and keep them there, to keep her body within the structure that she drew her power from. Still holding the image in her mind of that room, the haven her mother had created to protect her, Adelaide held out her hand. She touched damp stone covered with dust and cobwebs that had accumulated for ages. Rather than shrinking back from it, she placed her hand more firmly against that hard surface and began inching her way forward, step by step, her feet sinking and the mire tugging at her, trying to pull her down. She fought on. Her mother didn't speak again. She didn't have to. She was simply there, guiding and encouraging. Adelaide needed that, just as she needed the buffer that her mother had somehow created between her and the shadowy wraiths that were shrieking at her in rage at Agrita's behest. 1 step, 1 inch, 1 painstaking foot at a time. They moved ahead, down the maze of tunnels, and hopefully toward a safe exit.
Eldrin had no idea what was happening. In truth, with the wind propelling him backwards at least 1 inch for every 2 gained, all he and the others could think about was making it out. Between himself and Lord Mortimer, they carried the remains of Agrita's earthly body. They struggled to ignore shifting shadows, to fight past the aching muscles that developed as a result of every step taking place in a quagmire. He had no time to question who Adelaide had been speaking to, or what force suddenly had her pushing forward. He could only pray they were going in the right direction. After what seemed like ages, walking through that misery and torment, he was about to give up. Then he saw it. There was a faint glimmer of light ahead of them. "Do you see that? Is it real?" Mortimer asked. "I pray so," Eldrin said breathlessly. As if in answer to their question, the wind picked up more, tugging at their clothes, pulling and pushing them away from that small promise of hope. The nearer they came, the more they felt Agrita's wrath. Finally, they could see the entrance. The tunnel was bringing them out on the far side of the house, close to the beach path. Above the dank and rotting smell of the cellars was the scent of the sea. It wasn't a prayer of thanks. It was nothing nearly so eloquent, but Eldrin offered up a word in praise that would have sent Father Thomas into an apoplectic fit. Beside him, Mortimer grinned. "Precisely. Well said." Madame Leola offered them a quelling glance.
Let us not congratulate ourselves just yet. There is still much to be done before any of us are safe.
Eldrin said nothing more. He didn't have to. They had emerged into the bright light of day. Not exactly safe yet, but at least in less imminent danger. Ahead of them, Adelaide opened her eyes and looked back at them.
"We have to get to Warren. Now." Chapter 15. Frances walked along the stone fence that bordered the moor, careful not to touch it. That morning, her attendant had simply walked silently into her cell, for she refused to call it a room, and then walked out, leaving the door wide open. It was a gift from Agrita, but like all gifts from the witch, there was a cost. Agrita's plan to be born of the babe in Frances's womb was no more. The child would now serve another purpose. In the pocket of her borrowed cloak, Frances touched the vial. She'd stopped into an apothecary's shop, one well known to her for just such potions, and procured the cure to her little problem. She had only to drink it, and the child would be no more. Of course, it wouldn't come to that. Warren would stop her. He would stop her, and then with him under her control, they would stop the others. Frances stepped from the concealment of the trees that bordered the lane and that stone fence. She could see him, just inside the gate to the moor that faced the house. "Hello, husband," she called out softly. He whirled immediately, spade in hand, dirt streaking his face and clothes.
"Frances, what are you doing here?"
"Am I late to the party?" "No, I'm not. I'm right on time. You are about to do something very foolish," she said, and wagged her finger at him warningly.
"How did you get out?"
"Agrita wanted me out. She needs an ally, and while I may be a bit of a disappointment to her, I'm prepared to do what must be done to mend our fences, so to speak." Frances halted only feet from him, but still safely outside the moor's boundary. She would not be foolish enough to cross it. Reaching into her pocket, she lifted the vial out and held it aloft. "Will it matter to you that I'm about to kill the child in my belly, even though it isn't yours?"
"Frances, don't! You cannot do such a thing!"
"But I can, and I have. So many times before," she said, with a cold smile. "You were so eager to have a family in the beginning, and so despondent when time and again we failed to conceive. But we didn't, Warren. At least 4 times you managed to prove yourself a man, and that same number of times you proved yourself a dupe. You thought I was simply having my courses and a particularly difficult time with them. In fact, that wasn't my monthly flow at all. It was your child, your children, poisoned and expelled by me, like the worthless vermin they would have been. The world doesn't need another Llewellyn." His expression was a mask of fury, of anger and resentment and hurt.
"Why do you hate us so? What on earth could we have done to you?"
"You were weak," she replied. "All of you were weak. You had so much power at your fingertips, and you never attempted to use it. Never attempted to harness and make it your own."
"As you have?"
he sneered.
"You've just escaped from an asylum, wife. You're a known murderer, and if not for our influence would hang for it."
"What a rousing moral indictment from the drunken sot," she snapped back. "You'll have murder on your soul as well, Warren, if you don't step away from that hole. If you do not leave the moor this very instant and join me, I'll drink this potion and end the miserable existence of this brat in my belly right now."
"That is your choice, not mine. I'm not making you do it."
"No, but you have the power to stop it, and you're choosing not to," Frances shrieked at him. More calmly, and with cold calculation, she added, "And isn't that really the same thing?" Silence stretched between them for a long moment. Finally, with a curse, Warren tossed down the spade and walked toward her, but he didn't cross the fence as she'd expected. Instead, he grasped her wrist, twisting it painfully until the vial fell from her hand and broke on the stones below. "What are you doing?" she screamed.
"Something I should have done long ago. Being a man instead of a drunken cuckold,"
he snapped.
"We're ending this now, Frances, and you have a choice to make. You can live a life of relative ease in an asylum for whatever term the courts decide, and the family will continue to provide for you. And the child, when it is born, will be surrendered to our care. Or you can harm this child, and we will surrender you to the courts and let you face their mercy."
She didn't answer immediately. His grip tightened on her wrist, and it forced her to sink to her knees. "Igrida will destroy all of you." He pointed to the grave behind him.
"Igrida will be a pile of ancient bones locked forever in that hole."
"You think a grave can hold her?" Francis bluffed. Nothing was going as it should have. No one was being as they should have. Warren should have caved to her as he had always done. Where had this strength in him come from? Not just a grave. The quiet reply came from behind her. It was Adelaide. Francis dared to glance back over her shoulder. The four of them stood there, Agrida's remains rolled up in a rug between Lord Mortimer and Eldrin. As she looked at the small American whom she detested, Francis allowed her hatred to show plainly on her face. It was one of the few times in her life she'd ever been implicitly honest. "I despise you with all your earnest optimism and your American sensibilities." Adelaide actually smiled at her then. "Well, you aren't exactly likable, Francis. You're a horrid human being, and that cannot be laid at Agrida's doorstep. She did not make you what you are. You made yourself into what you've become. And we will not let you turn the child, this pawn you created to further your own agenda, into the very thing you yourself have become, an instrument of evil. You cannot force me to give birth to this child," Francis sneered.
"No, but we can provide you an incentive to do so,"
Eldrin interjected.
"If you want our assistance, that is the only way to obtain it."
To Warren, he added.
"Is it ready?" "Yes,"
Warren said.
"But expect things to get strange, I think. When you bring her onto this land, it will trigger something we cannot predict." "That seems to be the order of the day,"
Lord Mortimer replied drolly.
"I'm assuming we will need to restrain Mrs. Llewellyn."
"It's for the best," Adelaide said.
"Leola, dearest, loosen my cravat and donate it to the cause,"
Mortimer continued. Leola did as he asked and passed the bit of cloth to Warren, who then bound Francis's hands with it. He then retrieved his own discarded neckcloth and used that to bind her ankles.
"You're not going anywhere until I personally return you to that asylum,"
Warren stated emphatically. He rose to his feet and then looked at Eldrin.
"Let's get this done."
Chapter 16. Adelaide felt the disturbance as soon as they crossed the boundary to the moor. The very instant they stepped through the small gate, the whispers became shouts. The anger was palpable. It seethed and frothed in the mist, and in that mist, shapes began to appear. Dark figures drew together, coalescing into something that resembled human forms, but their anger was not directed at her or the others. It was focused entirely upon the makeshift shroud balanced between Eldrin and Lord Mortimer as they walked toward the grave that Warren had dug. For every step they took, those shapes drew closer, closing in around them, encircling them entirely. "Stay back! You can have her when we have done what we must to contain her."
You have no authority here. You have no authority here. You have no authority here.
It was no longer a whisper. They were shouting, all of them in unison, screaming in anger and rage. "Get her in the ground quickly," Adelaide said. "We haven't much time." They complied, carrying the body as fast as they safely could. They deposited her in the grave, and then unwrapped the carpet and petticoats to reveal the grim visage of the blackened, leathery corpse. Standing beside the grave, Adelaide retrieved the vial of blood from her pocket, as did Madame Leola. Together, they flanked the chasm and poured the blood onto the earthly remains of an evil that had tormented generations of people. As the first drop connected with the body, it shuddered, the mouth opened, and a horrible shriek escaped it. Agreda was once more bound to her withered flesh, but it would not hold her forever, not if she had a refuge. Adelaide looked over her shoulder at the other entities that approached them. They had to go, and they had to do it now.
"You all go. Run,"
Warren said.
"I'll finish the job here."
"It's not safe," Leola protested.
"It doesn't matter. It has to be done."
Leola reached up and withdrew the agate necklace she wore, similar to the one she'd given Eldrin. "This will offer some protection, but not enough. Be hasty, not thorough, and if you believe in prayer, now is the time." Warren nodded.
"Run, all of you."
Adelaide didn't protest. They were out of time. The dead trapped on that moor had a right to their anger, and after so many centuries, they were not going to be particular in how they meted out what they considered justice.
They moved quickly, fleeing the moor with all the speed they could muster. Eldrin feared it might be a waste of their time. The dead were bound to the moor by Agreda, but if her power had been neutralized, even temporarily, that might no longer be the case. As they neared the house, the women veered off, heading for the beach as they had planned. Eldrin paused long enough to retrieve the remaining sticks of dynamite from the crate he'd hidden. Entering the house, he turned the gas on to all the lamps he passed, without lighting any of them. Taking the fuse, he wrapped it around the bundle and placed it dead center in the house. With the explosion from it and the gas, the entire house would be reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes, or so he hoped. Retracing his steps, he made his way back outside, unrolling the fuse as he went. He signaled to Warren, who was barely visible within the mist that shrouded the moor. Warren seemed to understand, as he immediately tossed down his spade and made for the closest gate. As he neared it, Eldrin could hear him murmuring the prayers they had learned as children. Over and over again, he said the words like some sort of mantra. Together, they made their way down the path, as far as the fuse would reach. Then he lit it. As it burned towards the house and the waiting explosives inside, they hunkered down in the stand of trees and waited. The roar of it was thunderous. A cloud of dust rose around the remains of the house, but it wasn't simply one explosion. Dozens occurred. In each room, the dynamite and the gas together would create one after another. When it was done, Eldrin's ears were ringing, and he could hear nothing. Warren was speaking to him, but whatever the words were simply escaped him. Getting to his feet, he was dizzy from the blast, from the ringing in his ears. Together, he and Warren stumbled down the path, looking for all the world as if they were both drunk in that moment. Lord Mortimer had retrieved Frances and brought her to safety. When Eldrin and Warren emerged from the trees onto the sandy beach, Adelaide ran forward and wrapped her arms about him, hugging him tightly and raining kisses upon his face. She broke away just long enough to embrace Warren and kiss his cheek as well.
"I'm so happy you're both safe."
Eldrin nodded. He didn't hear her so much as he simply interpreted from her expression and the movement of her lips what she had said. He didn't trust himself to reply without shouting.
"Can't hear a thing!"
Warren yelled.
"The blast!"
"Oh, dear,"
Adelaide said, wringing her hands. Lord Mortimer nodded and shouted something. The sound was muffled, but it sounded as if he'd said something about normal. At that, Eldrin began to laugh. Normal. Nothing in their lives had ever been normal, and perhaps, for the first time, he had hope that it might be. He laughed harder until he collapsed on the sand, clutching his sides as tears streamed from his eyes. They had succeeded. Somehow they had managed to break free of the darkness that had hovered over his family, slowly choking them for hundreds of years. Misery, pain, death, insanity, abuse, all of it had been the work of Egrida, and she was no more.
"It's done,"
Adelaide said, kneeling beside him.
"It's really done."
Words were meaningless to him at that point, so Eldrin did the only thing he could to show her how he felt. He kissed her soundly.
Chapter 17. The train was bound for London. The servants that had elected to join them in their new home were seated across several cars. Adelaide and Eldrin were sharing a private car with Leola and Lord Mortimer. It was only 2 short days after the explosion. The village of Macanelith had opened their homes to the lot of them, as had the local hotel and the small inn above the tavern. Father Thomas had also housed several people in the church. Warren had taken Frances back to the asylum. She was to be kept under constant supervision until the child was born. Ultimately, she had accepted his bargain. In exchange for lenience and for remaining in the asylum, rather than facing prison and potentially hanging, she'd agreed to bear the child and hand it over to him. Adelaide feared that it might be a mistake. She worried about the ramifications for Warren. He was taking on the rearing of a child that wasn't his. He had only just managed to give up drinking, and there were no guarantees that his abstinence could be maintained.
"He will be fine,"
Eldrin said.
"Deaf as I am, I can all but hear the wheels turning in your mind right now."
Adelaide smiled. "Am I that transparent?"
"Yes,"
he said.
"and you're worrying needlessly. I think this will be the making of Warren, and if it isn't, we'll be there to help him."
"You don't think it's too much for him? He's taking over the mines. He's going to be raising a child alone. Frances's child at that. It's a terrible thing to say, but part of me fears that somehow it might be tainted by her blood," Adelaide admitted. "I feel like a horrible person for even thinking such a thing." Madame Leola leaned forward and laid her hand on Adelaide's. "My dear, we have all thought it. Have we not, Lord Montkeith?"
"Eldrin,"
he corrected.
"and yes, we have."
Adelaide smiled, relieved to see that her only friend and her husband had formed a bond of their own. "We should be talking of happier things, such as your wedding. When and where shall you have it now?"
"St. Paul's,"
Lord Mortimer said.
"It's where I attended church as a boy, though heaven knows they wouldn't recognize my face now. It's been ages."
"But it will not be a grand affair," Leola hastened to add. "We're both far too old for such things. Just a quiet ceremony at the church, and a small gathering of friends afterward at Lord Mortimer's townhouse. You will both come, of course. I can't imagine not having you there, as you've both been instrumental in bringing us together this way." Adelaide considered that. How strange that without Frances's wickedness, the love you have might never have been brought into the light. So many positive things have come from such ugliness. Had it not been for the death of my father, I would never have come to Cuscard and married Eldrin.
"Tragedy is the vehicle of fate,"
Eldrin said. "So it is," Adelaide agreed. "But we need no more of it. We are all where we ought to be, and with whom we ought to be." Lord Mortimer raised Leola's hand to his lips.
"So we are.
even blind old fools like me. Warren entered the mine office in Chester and met with the foreman. If anyone had questions about why he looked as if he'd been beaten half to death, no one dared ask them. Nicked and bruised from the flying debris from the explosion, but also from his experiences on the moor earlier, he was in no mood to provide answers to anyone. There were things he'd experienced on that moor, while alone there and shoveling dirt on Agrida's remains, that he'd not told anyone about. Not Eldrin nor Adelaide. Those were his demons, and he wouldn't visit them upon anyone else. But Frances knew. He'd stopped in to check on her, not out of concern for her, but to be certain that she was keeping to the spirit and letter of their bargain. She'd smiled slyly at him that morning, and uttered something that even then reverberated within him.
"You're not the same,"
she'd smirked.
"and you never will be."
"What do you mean?" he'd demanded. She looked up at him with satisfaction shining in her eyes.
"The dead have touched you, Warren. They've marked you, and the others will know. Every spirit that ever crosses your path will know. For the rest of your days, you will be haunted. Or you can crawl back into a bottle and try to block it out."
He'd knelt down before her then, so that they were eye to eye while she was strapped into a restraint jacket. "You are right about one thing, Frances. I'm not the same, nor will I ever be, and I'll not be crawling back into a bottle for you or anyone else. I can face the dead. I've done it before, and I can do it again. Make no mistake, the greatest weakness I ever had in life was you. But I'm cured of that." Her smirk didn't fade, but it did transform into an expression of such hatred that it was startling.
"Are you so certain? The child is mine, Warren. It's been inside my body while I've committed acts so terrible you cannot begin to imagine them. Do you think it will not be marked by such things? You have yet to discover your greatest weakness. But I know what it is. I'm giving it life, after all."
He rose then. "Love isn't a weakness, Frances. If you'd realized that sooner, you might have been spared all of this. I'll be back in 2 days. Try not to kill anyone in the interim." Hours later, in the mine office, her words and her veiled threats had stayed with him and continued to ring loudly in his mind. Was it a mistake to bring the child into the world? Had halting her from ending its life before it even began been a terrible mistake? He couldn't think that. He had to believe in redemption, for the child and for himself. It was an innocent, after all, whatever Frances might be. Cursing Frances, he focused on the business at hand, reviewing contracts and production logs. Once the work was done, there were other tasks to see to. He needed a home, one that would be fit to raise a child in. Then he would need to hire a staff and a wet nurse, and heaven knew what else. He was out of his depth. A secretary first, then. Someone who would know how to organize and manage his life and his household. That was the key. Then he could study and learn. He could arm himself against whatever darkness Frances might have drawn to the child. Someone had to protect it, after all.
Epilogue. 2 months later. Adelaide walked along the corridors of the townhouse that she and Eldrin would now be calling home. The servants were settled in for the night, and she hadn't wanted to disturb anyone. She'd made her own way down to the kitchen and carried a plate of small sandwiches, and a bottle of champagne. Both were left over from the celebration that very morning of the wedding of Lord and Lady Mortimer. It had been a beautiful service, and a lovely wedding breakfast had followed. Eldrin glanced up from shaving as she entered.
I'd wondered where you'd gotten off to.
Why are you shaving? You're not going out, are you? She asked, placing her plate laden with treats on the table. He grinned at her.
No, I mean to stay in. But given the marks I left on your delectable skin last night from not shaving, I thought I'd attempt to be less of a brute this time.
Adelaide felt herself blushing. I really didn't mind so much. I rather like feeling your whiskers on my skin. He stepped forward, rubbing his freshly shaven cheek against hers.
But when you show up at a social event with beard burn all over your neck, people do tend to talk. We're in society now, for better or worse, and need to not behave like the hedonistic creatures we so long to be.
It was the perfect opportunity, but it was difficult to think, much less to speak, when his lips were trailing hot, open-mouth kisses along her neck. Breathlessly, she managed. I suppose you're right. We need to at least be able to feign respectability, especially now that we're about to be parents. He stopped. She'd never seen a person grow so perfectly still. He didn't even breathe, it seemed. At last, after a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, he drew back from her.
What did you say?
Adelaide smiled. I said that if we're going to be parents, we should at least be able to feign respectability.
Not if. You didn't say if.
He corrected.
You said we are about to be... Adelaide, for God's sake, just tell me. I can't think right now to decipher it all.
I'm going to have your child, she said. We're going to be a family, Eldrin. Children of our own. He pulled her to him then, holding her so gently, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. It brought tears to her eyes.
I didn't think I could be happier,
he said.
And in truth, I felt like an ungrateful sot for praying to have more than I've already been blessed with. This, Adelaide, is more than I ever dared ask for, more than I ever dared dream of. You, my love, have given me everything.
She stepped back out of his arms and walked slowly backwards to the bed. As she reached it, she parted her dressing gown and let it slip from her shoulders to form a silken puddle at her feet. Not everything. Not yet. Come to bed, and I'll show you what else I have to give. He did as she bade, approaching her with sensual intent. They fell together onto the bed, greedy for one another's touch. She'd gotten her happy ending, Adelaide thought. In all the romantic stories she'd read, in all the stories she'd begged her mother to tell her as a child, it was that perfect moment of happiness and hopefulness at the end which she had always craved. And it was hers.
What are you smiling about?
He asked, looking down at her. Everything. I'm too happy to be able to do anything but smile, she said. I love you so very, very much.
And I love you, Adelaide, more than anything. I hope one day to show you how much.
It'll take you more than one day, she teased. But you can start now. And he did. The end.
This has been Passage of Shadows, the Victorian Gothic Collection, Book 3, Written by Chastity Bolin. Narrated by Lillian Eves and Vincent Lee Grayson. Copyright 2019 by Chastity Bolin. Production copyright 2020 by Chastity Bolin.